3, 2, 1. Here's Charlie.
We want to wait for.
We can wait.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Brand.
It's the wrong name plate though. Or is it? No, this is mine. Oh. This one's
on
on
the back.
It's always been like that.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, that's how I know it's mine.
Douglas. There a third person? We just have chairs and we have members. I don't know. I'm not remembering the other person. Hold on. Okay, that's good. That makes sense. Okay, I can for me. That third chair was throwing me off. All right, I'm good to go. Yeah, should I just kick it off? All right. Well, welcome everybody to the August edition of the Multi-modal Transportation Commission's monthly meeting. We're going to start with our study session, and before we do that, we are going to go over the rules of the hybrid meetings.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Kuzmiak. Good evening, everyone. I have a few housekeeping items for the hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. And when you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And I'll just turn the meeting back over to Chairperson Kuzmiak.
Thank you. I just realized as I'm reading over this that it says anyone attending needs to wear a mask. Are we sticking with that, or what are the rules around masks these days? I have no idea.
They're not required.
Okay,
that I'm aware of.
Okay,
something's changed.
Well, it's in the text, but that doesn't mean that it might just be an artifact of a past agenda. So
yeah, okay, might be an old agenda.
Sounds good. Okay,
go.
Well, in that case, our study session for today is going to be the 2023 to 2027 CIP, or Capital Improvement Plan, and budget update. So it's budget season, and City Commission has been talking over the various projects that are in the CIP for funding or deferral. And I believe, Dave, do you have a prepared agenda item?
Yeah, so I didn't prepare a presentation, but I can kind of maybe walk through some of the attachments to the agenda. So on July 12th, City Manager provided the City Commission a recommended budget and capital improvement plan. And that will be, there was a public hearing with that, and I think that goes back to the City Commission for another public hearing the last meeting in August 23rd. But anyway, the board's had conversations about projects in the capital improvement plan, and I know last month you discussed getting a committee to review projects or have a discussion on the process, I guess, maybe of the capital improvement plan. And so I guess a little bit of just general background on the plan that started in the spring. So staff submits projects. Really, we started with last year's plan, the 2022 to 2026 plan, and projects are in there in the outer years. And those kind of are the first projects that we look at when drafting the new 5-year plan. And so staff threw a bunch of projects out there. There was we received resident request projects as well. So there's some ability for the public to request projects. And then the projects are scored with the city's CIP prioritization guidelines. So I've attached the a summary of those guidelines on the scoring, and really kind of the scoring is trying to get in line with the commitments in the strategic plan. And so the purpose of the scoring is just really to start the conversation on the priorities of the community based off the strategic plan, and kind of start comparing projects against each other. So there's all sorts of different types of projects in the capital improvement plan, and so it's an attempt to start evaluating those projects against each other and prioritizing them. So, for those that aren't familiar with the CIP projects, those are projects that are over $100,000 that create a new city asset or substantially improve an existing one. We do this every year. It's an annual process to develop a 5-year capital improvement plan. And so that's a little bit of the background on that. And so after the projects were submitted, each commitment has a team that evaluated those and scored the projects. And the projects themselves on the agenda. So if you click on the link, the 5-year CIP from July the 12th, that link there. And I'll see if I can just share my screen here as well. That is all of the projects that were listed and the scores with them, and by different categories here. So let's see. That was me, sorry. All right. There you go. Great. Okay. So what I did just to maybe help the group out a little as we talk about transportation related projects is to highlight some of the projects that are transportation related that are in the 5-year plan. So like I said, they're kind of organized by categories. The up top you got airport, facilities. Here this on the bottom half of the first page is the parks and amenities projects. That's where we have our Lawrence Loop projects. On the second page, under roads and bridges, are some of the roadway reconstruction projects, bike ped projects, projects that MSO department has put in to the CIP. And then we got a couple traffic control projects and vehicles and equipment category where you see the transit buses. On the third page, our third and fourth pages are projects that did not make it into the funded category. So the section evaluating for grant funding here, and on the final page, the unfunded. Those are all projects that did not score high enough and were just ultimately not recommended for the 5-year CIP. But certainly could be reviewed again in future CIP planning. And so those projects don't necessarily go away, but could be considered in future years. So it's not totally uncommon for some projects to be unfunded for a couple of years, and then ultimately they will move up into the funded category. So this evaluating for grant funding is kind of a new delineation or category that I think that we created. I think just to kind of look at some of these in here may have the possibility to we might be able to apply for some grants that may be coming out. So we put those in that category. So they're not, they could be certainly moved up if we were able to get a grant. So, so that's that. And I've also attached this project sheets for each project onto the agenda. And, I guess with that, I'd be happy to maybe walk through these if you'd like me to, or if there's any questions, just let me know what you'd like to do. But we've got it till 6 to talk about it.
Sounds good.
So
thank you for the explanation, especially for putting all this stuff together, because it wasn't easy to find otherwise. Like you kind of have to know exactly which city commission meeting they were talking about, what page it is, and then do all the dissecting of what's transportation, what's not. So definitely appreciate the background work to make it easier for us here. I'm going to just kind of start off by putting out a proposed kind of pathway that I think the study session could go. So feel free to offer your own interpretation, but based on what we talked about last time. So we voted on creating basically an ad hoc committee to kind of dig in deeper, kind of like we're doing here, and discuss as many of the projects that we could wrap our heads around, and then generate a list of questions, comments, concerns that we would then send to Dave, which I should have done on Friday. So ideally that would have been into you and you would have had at least a little bit of time to look at it. So since that's the case, I'm trying to think of how we can best use our time. I don't necessarily want to be asking you technical questions the whole time, because that could be better spent offline. But since our group of 3, so it's myself, Commissioner Baltuska, and Commissioner Schnacke are all kind of looking into this in detail. If anybody else is particularly interested in it, we could certainly have a discussion on stuff that stuck out to you and try to, I guess, discuss it in real time if we would like to. But I think ultimately what's going to happen is that we're going to take the concerns of our small committee that are fairly detailed and technical, and any other general concerns from the rest of the commission, send it on to Dave, try to get some answers, and then come up with the final position, more or less. And then the deliverable of that could be some kind of letter to the city commission or the city manager saying like, hey, we've had a look at all these. Here's what we think about it. I don't think it's necessarily going to change whatever outcome they may have already decided on, but I do think it'll at least allow us to become more familiar with what's in the future. That being said, did anybody have any kind of big picture questions off the bat that they wanted to address based on what they're seeing in the list here?
I just have a couple of questions having to do with what we're seeing here. Like for instance, on the unfunded, there's street maintenance program and it's unfunded. How is that distinguished? I mean, street maintenance is funded. I'm sure. So what is that category? How do you? I guess I could have looked at the project sheets, and that probably would have.
Yeah, that's a
difference. But
yeah, great question. So some projects, particularly street maintenance, it's partially funded and partially unfunded.
Okay.
So speaking to street maintenance, here in the last year, we completed our review and modeling with asset management of the condition of all city streets, and ultimately determined through that process that $14.8 million would be the target for us to achieve a pavement condition index of 70 across the city. Right now, we're from our last review a couple of years ago, we were at a 66. So it's a slight improvement, but nonetheless, just as a benchmark, that's the target. So in next year's, in the proposed plan, there was where is it? 9.365 that was funded, and a portion that was unfunded, which let's see here, 5.125 million. So that is the case for that project. There are some projects that we've put in funded for design, and maybe construction is unfunded. But that's not uncommon either. So there might be some that is the case. And And I think there's a few in here that show up a couple of times just because there's multiple funding sources and there's some duplication of the same project in here. I think, I thought there was one. Lawrence Loop, Michigan, the Sanders Shaws in there twice, both underfunded, but it was two different funding sources.
Yeah, I noticed that one, the Lawrence Loop, Michigan, the Sanders Shaw, under was not highlighted as yellow in that section, which is on page page 1, I guess. So that was a question I guess I had. What, because the yellow means MSO projects, or what is the yellow, highlighted yellow?
Yeah, the yellow highlight are just projects that I highlighted that I thought were applicable to this discussion. So I just kind of went through there, and
Okay.
yeah, I didn't highlight it on the second time there, but
Okay. This one.
it is funded, and we're actually working on design plans now. That was a project that was designed in 22, and these are the construction funds in 23.
And I guess, I don't know whether this is the time to talk about, but the prioritization piece of it. I just looked at, since the discussion about the Wakarusa extension was such a big topic last time, I pulled up that project sheet, and then I was reading through the prioritization summary, and when I looked at the rankings there, it didn't seem to match up with the score that's on this page, and I didn't look at other projects to see if that was common, and I just wondered if you know why that would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was changed or not, specifically. I know that originally that project, when it was submitted a few years ago. It was just the extension south of K10. And through our discussions with KDOT and in partnering on the South Lawrence Trafficway improvements, it's been renamed to South Lawrence Trafficway Improvements. So it wasn't scored based off of that. And the South Lawrence Trafficway Improvements, that's the $7 million, includes the Wakarusa extension, reconstructing Wakarusa north of K10 to Clinton Parkway, that section that's in the city there, and some improvements out off of E900 road just west of K10 at Clinton Parkway interchange, and upgrading that street to city standards. So there's 3 projects. So when it went through the scoring, it wasn't, it didn't include all those projects, and I don't know.
I just noticed that the category strategic plan outcome alignment score was 6. But when we look at the procedures, it's the scale is 0 to 3. So that's what I didn't know how to interpret that, I guess.
So there's some weighting that goes into it too. So that might be,
Maybe that's it.
and I might be able to pull that up here and explain that better.
I didn't see that in the procedures, but maybe I didn't read it all the way to the end.
On page 2.
Yeah, we'll share my screen. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, I think hopefully this explains the scoring a little. So they're all, these are scores 0 to 3, and then here's the weighting factor. So if it had a 3, it would be multiplied by 2.
Okay, yeah, I see that weight, and that's,
And down below, further is kind of some of the factors, I guess, that go into the scoring or determining the scores of the 0 to 3, some guidelines.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other general
No,
questions? I know you said you had a couple.
yeah, I don't have.
I have a question. On page 90, the line, the cost for the multimodal transfer facility, does that include I know there's going to be another location in town where there's going to be, where people will be able to transfer it. Does that include that cost of that project, or is that project will be a separate project?
Let me see if I can pull up that page. So there's two different transit projects. There's the transfer facility that's in the middle of that's undergoing design right now. Should be bid here by the end of the year at Bob Billings and Crestline, and then a downtown transfer facility. That project it's on pause until the other one is kind of completed and the route redesign's done, and then there will be a whole. We're going to start from scratch on community engagement, looking at sites downtown again, and start having a discussion on that. And that hasn't started yet, and maybe may not until next year. But as far as the funding goes, I believe it's a separate. It should be a separate project. What page were you on?
Page 90.
Page 90
Just, I mean, not the separate sheet. It's just on your line item.
of the. There we go. Oh. Well,
It might be page 3 of 90 on the agenda packet.
where do I get the link to the entire packet?
Top of the agenda.
Ah.
Yeah,
Agenda. There we go.
best
All
I
right.
can tell, TR 2101 is the multimodal transfer facility, and that's the only transfer facility in the 5-year plan.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that the downtown one isn't in the plan at all. I guess it's because we just don't know how much it's going to cost yet. So that may be
Yeah, that might be.
because
Yeah.
it's definitely broken out. I just don't know.
Yeah,
What happened?
Adam Weigel would be much better suited to speak to that, but I can follow up with him on that.
Did see in there that there's a project with the library that looks like creating event space and retractable bollards that maybe would come out of the street. That seems interesting.
Well,
Are those the same projects?
Same year.
Okay.
Downtown event space near the library, PR 282414.
Do you have a document that's searchable, by the way? Because I'm not able to search any of these things.
Yeah, the city's document searchable.
Okay.
The 700-page one.
Thanks. Library.
There's a buffered bike lane, 9th Street, Illinois to Vermont Street. It's also in that list of evaluation for grant funding.
whoops. What am I doing? The TR 2101 is the project on Bob Billings. So I guess maybe I'll just take a chance to speak to a couple of these, just FYI on some of these. So the Lawrence Loop Iowa crossing, that's something that we're looking at having conversations with KDOT to see if we can include that in our project. It wasn't something that we could include in our cost share for the project. However, there may be some opportunities with grant fundings and new opportunities with the bipartisan infrastructure law to see if there's any funding that we could take advantage of the timing on that project. So that's in there for some funding for design in 23 and construction in 24. That's something that we're looking into right now and having some conversations on. Lawrence Loop, 8th to 7th Street. It's a short segment of the Lawrence Loop gap that we have over there between the Santa Fe Depot and where the Polar Lofts are at. So that's in the proposed budget for construction next year. The Kaw River Commons project, that's the phase A is the section of the loop between Santa Fe Depot and Constant Park. And so that was a resident request. It's also down here below Lawrence Loop Trail Street to Constant Park. Same project. So it's kind of duplicative, I guess, but with this last revision of the CIP, some adjustments made to try to get things to balance out. But that is planned for doing design next year, or at least some conceptual design, because I really think we need to do that before we go after grants on that project, which would be a great project for grants. So Lawrence Loop, Michigan to Sandra Shaw Trail. That project's in design. And then in the out years here, we have Lawrence Loop Trail, Queens Road to Castle. So that's a large gap in the northwest section of the loop. Bicycle wayfinding signage. I put this in here as it's probably just a placeholder. The $50,000 is to start talking about design and standards, I guess, behind signage and creating a plan and a hierarchy for signage. And then the $200,000 was just simply a placeholder to start implementing signage, but certainly could be more than that, and that can be added to in future years. But I know we've had some conversations about signage in our meetings here and incorporating those into projects. So as one of the things that was in our bikeway plan for an action item as signage. So hopefully this starts making steps at achieving that.
With the funding that's demonstrated here for the Lawrence Loop, how much of the loop will be completed by the 2027 fiscal year?
Good question.
Well, it looks like quite a bit of funding's dedicated to it. I'm curious if it gets it all the way done.
Yeah. So we'll have the gap. I think the Queens Road to Castled.
It's proposed 2,300,000
would be the last gap. If we can get this section here around City Hall to connect to the Constant Park we're working on that section now by the Turnpike that's under construction, and then we can get the Michigan and Sandra Shaw. That Queens Road would be the last one, I believe. So that would, to answer your question, that would be
it.
Unless I'm missing something.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the commission have any general questions or specific? That's fine too. You can always roll those into our assessment on the committee. Okay. And a couple, then I'll roll off. Dave, at one point, I thought there was a separate CIP for vehicles, like a fleet thing. So as glad as I am to see the electric street sweeper on the list, I thought there was a vehicle one separately.
Yeah.
Hold up now.
Yeah. In prior years, we had, we called it VERP, plan, which included vehicles and we had, maintenance plan. And so those are not included in the CIP this year. And those are in the operating budget.
Okay. Yeah, I saw a couple of other vehicle related ones in there, like the charging station for electric vehicles. And then there was something about replacing maintenance vehicles, which I know doesn't have anything to do with us necessarily. I'm just curious if there's a whole bunch of other vehicle stuff that is in a different budget somewhere.
Because it seems like that's under, it says vehicles and equipment, and there's the bus project, electric bus project, that's a street sweeper. So are you talking about something else that's separate?
Yeah, like a different list entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how, like, for example, we have the NMPPP that is kind of rolled up into here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the case now with the vehicles, that there's like kind of its own thing and then it just slots in here anyway?
Yes. Yeah. It's separate from this list.
Okay. Interesting. I think the two projects that stuck out to me the most, and I don't want to get into huge details here and cost and timeline and everything. Just kind of broad strokes. There's one about what appears to be a major like rehab or reconstruction of 6th Street, and then another one that appears to be a big rehab of Iowa Street. And it looks like they're right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it appears that there's a lot of money for 6th Street, Iowa to Mass in 2023, which to me indicates construction, but I don't know if that's just a huge design project or what. So if you could give any background on that, I think that would be interesting to kind of hear where those projects are at.
Sure. Yeah, that 6th Street project was in there last year. So we're doing design this year, and that's construction. So it's a major rehab project as far as the street goes. Mill and overlay, patching, curb and gutter. We're also redoing the water line from Michigan to the west of Michigan, I believe. And so we are kind of started working on design plans for that, but it's more of a maintenance type project. It's not a reconstruction project.
So how does that compare with, say, East 9th Street, where it's still East 9th Street, but like the general layout of it is changing? Is with 6th Street, was it maybe not as in poor of condition, so it's really just kind of replacing what's already there?
Yeah. It's not in need of full reconstruction. So it's one of our sections of state highway, and we've kind of deferred it for the last few years as we've tried to get state funding. The state has a program for city maintained highways, and anyway, it's not in the same condition as some of our other arterial streets that need to be fully reconstructed, and so that's why we just intend to do a mill and overlay. But we'll also be doing some other things, some repairing curb ramps where we need to, and curb and gutter, and I think we're also going to tie that project into the we're redoing this traffic signals here at 6th and Tennessee and Mass Street. So that's we're trying to take the corridor approach with that one and do the street signals and water line all together.
So I'm trying to, I guess, reconcile what I was kind of hoping would be going on with 6th Street with what actually is and where it stood in terms of the condition of the street and how that factors into how staff chooses, how the project kind of goes down. Because in my mind, and I might be way off here, this seems kind of like a missed opportunity for building a more complete street. It's currently, pretty heavily car dominated, and there's room for buses, but it's not like there's slip lanes or anything. The bus stops are kind of in various states of repair and amenities. Biking is basically good luck on the street with your life, or go on the tiny sidewalk, which occasionally is directly up against the street, depending on where you are. So it seems like that there could have been an opportunity for, as you said, like a corridor plan to kind of get the whole thing up to some kind of good multimodal standard. But I guess I'm wondering, was the condition of the street bad enough, and it doesn't sound like this is the case, to require like just charge ahead with something and just get it done because it can't wait? I'm just wondering, did we miss an opportunity here on MMTC to kind of get better than what we currently have, which is not great for anybody except for those in cars?
Well, I would just say our approach is to do the lowest cost of ownership maintenance work. And at this point, like, we don't have a lot of base failures on the street. We have a few that will probably need to be patched, but so it's more of a major maintenance project. Other sections, East 23rd Street, which is under construction now, that needed to be reconstructed. It was falling apart. We've mill and overlaid it many times and sunk a lot of money into patching, and we're money ahead by reconstructing it. So, that's a $10+ million project. And this project, just the pavement on this project's probably $1 million to $1.5 million. So, yeah, it would be nice to reconstruct a lot, our arterial streets and do new things, but we're also trying to be cognizant of the budget, and so it may need it in the future, just not right now. So,
So, as I recall, was it in the non-motorized plan that wasn't there a reconstruction of the sidewalk on that section from at least to Michigan to Iowa?
yeah, from Iowa to Wisconsin. And then in our bikeway plan, the bike route goes up Wisconsin and uses 5th Street to go to the east instead of 6th Street.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're going to be completing that gap in the network with this project.
Well, so that will all be done at the same time that you're doing the maintenance on the street.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the Iowa Street project. That is a reconstruction project. So we have some funding for design the next couple of years, and then construction in 2025.
Okay. So since this is a reconstruction instead of is that the same thing as 6th Street then? Are they both kind of at the same class of reconstruction?
Well, the reconstruction is more geared towards removing all the pavement, replacing it. Most of our arterial streets we've done replaced with concrete. 6th Street project's just a mill and overlay, just milling off the top 2 inches of asphalt and going back with asphalt, 2 inches of asphalt.
Okay, so it's kind of a more invasive surgery here then.
It's full reconstruction. So it'd be similar to what we're doing on East 23rd Street and what we've done on Iowa to the north.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you say there is an opportunity for MMTC to weigh in for the concept design and maybe get more bike facilities in there, or just even take a look at it and just kind of see what's there? Or due to the fact that it's a US number route or a state highway, are our options kind of limited by what KDOT would allow?
On 6th Street?
I guess on 6th and Iowa, because both those sections are US Route 59, right?
They are. Well, we try to follow our bikeway plan and make, as part of our complete streets policy on these reconstruction projects, we evaluate the appropriate facility and make a recommendation. And so that would be something we certainly would do on Iowa Street. We got a shared use path already on Iowa Street, so I don't know if there's anything we would do different on that project. It's just a short segment in there.
Yeah.
On 6th Street, we're making the improvement on the bike network there. And further to the east, it's not on our bike plan as a bike route. So we're not.
I guess what this is making me think about is that we maybe need to get more involved in the bikeway plan because I don't know it well enough to have been able to ahead of time. Like,
So the bike plan calls for shared use path from Iowa to Wisconsin.
mhm,
At that point, then you would go north
on Fifth.
from 6th to 5th Street, and then there would be a bike boulevard that would take you further east.
Or just a more pleasant street in the meantime, but eventually a bike boulevard. Yeah.
It's a lower, there's less traffic on 5th Street. So the idea is to try to keep people off 6th Street. I don't believe there's enough room for a shared use path all the way along 6th Street, which is why we
Yeah.
see
So
it moving over to 5th.
not unless we did an actual road diet, and those seem to be political suicide for the most part. So I'd be pretty surprised if a road diet could actually go through, because that's what you would probably need to remove some kind of lane to make space for a bike lane on, where the right of way is right now. But yeah, it's interesting now looking at this bikeway plan. As somebody who used to bike around that area like all the time, I kind of figured that out eventually, but it wasn't obvious. You just kind of have to know where to go. So I'm starting to see the appeal of these wayfinding signs, because for somebody who's new to the area, like you would just assume go to 6. That's where everybody else is going. Not a good idea. So, all right. Well, that's helpful information. At least I kind of know where we stand and why we are where we are. So that makes sense. Okay. Did anybody else have any other questions?
So Nick, could you explain again the subcommittee work and kind of how that's going to fold into this discussion?
Yeah.
Kind of next steps.
So we're definitely behind. Things got kind of sidetracked for a couple of weeks there, but what the plan is for us three to meet first, doing our homework and going over kind of line by line and seeing what kind of sticks out to us, what interesting things we saw that we maybe didn't anticipate in the CIP list. From there, meet up and once again, go through line by line, have a discussion about each, see if we have any overall questions or concerns that we can't answer by ourselves. Then send that list to Dave, who will then either read it and answer or distribute to, whoever else needs to see it. That's the step that we're currently on. So I need to get it out of my notes and into his email. From there, after we get answers back, then we'll have probably a follow-up meeting to go over that and see if we need to revise our original thoughts, and then kind of make a unified statement from there that we would then bring back to MMTC. That being said, since this is going to be adopted sometime in late August, we're not going to have time to do that before, City Commission decides on it. So fortunately, I kind of blew the timeline there. So I'm thinking...
Well, I don't know that you did actually, because, we're kind of wrestling with what that process could be. And my thought, I guess, is a question and is, getting that out there and as a kind of a unified statement is a great idea. And I just wonder in future years, if we could devise, if there's a better point at which to provide that input, so that we could then work backwards to where we would need to start and where we could insert those kinds of comments.
I'm thinking probably like late spring, honestly, like before the city manager even brings the initial CIP idea to City Commission. If we could have kind of a read on what could be going in there early on and maybe help provide our recommendations. Yeah. If that would be of interest to the City Commission and the manager.
Well, there's, as part of the process, it was, I think in June when there was, when it was first published, the CIP, and there was 2 different, options. And so that was really the first, I guess, review of it. And then, there was a public hearing, and then, I guess it was July 12th was the revised plan. And then the next step is there's a public hearing on August the 23rd, and then it gets adopted the first meeting in September. So I don't know if back to the question on timing, if you were going to if the board wanted to make a recommendation on something, I don't know if you have time to do that before September.
Is there a point because you mentioned in terms of the prioritization and coming out of a team with MSO on some of those specific projects, is there a point at which before you submit it to the city manager that we could have an opportunity to look at what you're recommending to go into the plan, or is that a different, maybe I'm not understanding exactly what that process is.
Yeah. So in the spring, we open the portal with all departments to input projects. And so it's not just MSO, but parks in it. So I don't know if I see all of them myself. So I don't know. I guess I don't know if there's I don't foresee the ability to provide this board with that information if others aren't able to see it.
Sure.
But most of the projects, for the most part, kind of roll over. So you see the 5-year plan, and then we start working on the 24 to 28 or 28 plan next year. You'll see a lot of these same projects just kind of moved up. Sometimes those unfunded projects then kind of move their way up. And priorities can change and the scores can change, and so things still can move around. And there could still certainly be something that comes up that wasn't on there previously. So I think a majority of these projects, quite honestly, were on there last year. I don't, the Car River Commons was a new resident request, but it's still that section of the loop. They had 3 phases. They submitted phase B and C, which were completely new projects. But as far as staff submissions go, the bicycle wayfinding signage was a new one. That one's funded.
Bollards on Mass Street, I think, are new, or have they been in there for a few years?
Well, on the Mass Street is that's a new project. There was a couple Mass Street projects replace the traffic signals, put in bollards, and we've kind of tried to merge those into Mass Street Reconstruction, I think is what it's named. It's in the I'm not seeing it. Yep. Oh, there it is. It's under evaluating for grant funding, downtown Mass Street reconstruction, and streetscape improvements. Let me get back to my share screen. It's this one, MS 250080. So that one was a new project. And I think we've adjusted some of the dollars. We've seen with inflation, costs are going up, so we increased the dollars on some projects, and so that has an effect too. And some things get shifted around with the projected costs, but. Other than that, I don't think if there's any other new ones that weren't on there last year. But I guess, if as we move ahead, if the board's interested in something that, that's not in the CIP, and maybe we have a discussion in the spring about what was on there the previous year. And, we do have a process for resident requests that we go through, but if there's other projects that the board wants to throw out there that should be considered, we can talk about that in the future, or maybe ways to bring it up earlier in the process.
Yeah, I think that's why I proposed maybe doing spring, because like you said, a lot of the projects just roll over. So for the most part, except for a couple of, maybe later surprises and new additions, like what you saw last year is probably going to be on there this year as well. So I think we at least try to get a head start in the springtime. So in case we do get derailed for 2 or 3 weeks, like I did, then should be fine. So I'm thinking in terms of next steps, what would probably make sense to still be effective with this committee that we kind of pieced together. I'm going to send questions and concerns to Dave. If any of you have specific things that you'd like to, I guess, ask as well, if you could just forward those to me, I guess, and CC Dave, just so you know, so we have kind of a full list. Although it might make sense to send to me first because there's a chance we've already covered it in our meeting. We went over pretty thoroughly. And then from there, Dave, if you could get those back within a week, that'd be fine probably, because I don't think they have to, they're not going to public hearing till 8/23, it looks like.
Yep.
So
Yeah, anytime. If anyone that has any questions about any project, you can here to answer them.
and then
And if you look on that last link, I didn't pull it up, but there's a project sheet for each one that maybe has a little more description on the project. That may help. That may help as well.
yeah, they've definitely helped on a couple of them. So I guess I propose to finish this off then. It'll probably take some kind of, I guess, letter to the city commission. Does that make the most sense to everybody? Just a letter kind of penned by MMTC saying like, hey, here's what we're thinking about. You know, like it could either be we support everything you're doing right now, or based on some concerns we have, we would love to see a reorganization of these, or at least think about it for next year. I don't know. What sounds like the most effective to the group? I mean, do you think a letter makes sense? Or is it not much they can do, you think, by August 23rd? Because the final vote you said is in September, right?
Yeah, the final hearing resolution to pass the budget in September.
But that's for the whole budget, which includes also like the maintenance and the operating budget and all that kind of
And
stuff, right?
CIP, yeah.
Yeah. So is the CIP finalized then on the 23rd?
Yes, after that meeting, it will be.
Okay. So I don't expect that we can really do much to change the course, or even if we want to. I mean, after we get more, I guess, feedback on questions, it could be that like, yeah, we approve, that's fine. But it'd be nice to know that, I guess. In terms of getting a letter, I would probably have to have authorization from the commission to write said letter. Is that something that we want to do a motion on, or do we not feel strongly enough that we need to have influence here? I'm kind of okay either way.
Can you help me understand what the letter would say?
It would probably be a bullet point list of, first a brief introduction of, hey, based on this recent discussion around the Walker Roost extension, which kind of caught some of us off guard, we decided that MMTC needed to have a deeper look into the CIP and see if there was any other projects that we felt that we should know about early on. Here are our findings. And it would probably be only the very high points and only the most important ones of projects that we feel like either aren't funded but should be, are funded but shouldn't be, or are prioritized in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense. So it would only be, I think, general concerns if it's not otherwise a blanket support. And it could be that, right? Like we in general support everything here, except for point A, point B, and point C. If there are point A, it's kind of hypothetical at this point because we just don't know.
So you're not proposing that we object to anything that's in the CIP?
Not at this
proposed?
point, not until I get clarification from Dave on the questions that we've raised.
Okay.
Because I don't want to prematurely jump to conclusions if I don't really know what the full story is. But there could be. I mean, for example, I think if we had known about the Walker Roost extension, we probably would have objected on that one, right? At least I would have. So, yeah, I guess it's one of those things where if there is something that's years out that we're seeing could be not fully aligned to what we think the strategic direction is, it'd be good to bring it up now instead of in 2 or 3 years.
So are you saying that that probably we wouldn't object to the Walker Roost extension, or how do we reflect the public comment that came? I mean, I know the city commission is getting it. also, but how do we reflect that?
I think the only way I would really incorporate that into this letter is say, this caught us by surprise and it shouldn't have, and this is why we're looking into this now. Basically, if we had known 3 to 5 years ago that this was in the works based on what we know about Horizon 2040 or Plan 2040, we probably wouldn't have supported it. Not much we can do at this point, it seems, but here are the projects coming down the pipeline that you guys should probably know about. So I know it's kind of ambiguous at this point because I'm asking you to vote whether or not you support a letter that we don't yet know the content of. So
I guess I'd just propose sending a draft first so that everyone can, I guess, give it a look over.
I would sure love to, but I don't know with COMA if we can have a vote over email, right? I don't know how we would do it given can't do it, right?
I don't think we can. Unless the board had some general direction on what would be in the letter. But at this point, I'm not really hearing any opposition.
I feel like we're on the right path. Timing is not good. So I would be really comfortable with taking this as a lesson learned and thinking about how we approach next year's CIP. Sounds like there's some good thought already in how we would be more engaged, and we would then expect ourselves to generate some feedback that we could provide to the commission regarding kind of how we understand what's been proposed by the city manager. And so what's really useful here is when you go through and you identify across all the different departments, those CIP items that do impact transportation, you recognize there's a whole lot of commitment the city commission is being asked to make. And an analysis of that could be really helpful for them. Also looking at those out years could be something that they'd really appreciate because they are probably focused a lot on that, next year and year after. And so I think that analysis could be really helpful. It needs to be done in it shouldn't be done too quickly. And it'd be helpful if we could see the analysis early enough that, the whole Multi-Modal Transportation Commission could weigh in on it as a letter is being drafted.
Yeah. And discuss each of those bullet points to have a unified approach, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because we may not agree on all of them.
Now, another thing that I think this analysis can do for us this year is help us to think about what are topics for our study sessions, what are things that we can see are being thought through by other departments, not just MSO, and how do we get engaged in that work? If bicycle wayfinding if that's going to be funded, and I see it looks like it's doesn't have MS in front of it, so I think that means it's coming out of another department like Parks and Rec. I'm not sure I'm reading all that right.
That's true.
Just the codes that are used. So where is the role of the Multi-Modal Transportation Commission in that work? And it may not be seen by staff as our work, but we might see it as our work. So how do we begin the process to get engaged, at least in understanding what's going on? Maybe that's simply through a study session where Parks and Rec would come to us and update us on where they're going with that planning. Or maybe it's the MPO. I don't know where exactly that work's emanating. If it's coming out of MSO, then I guess we're good to go.
On this wayfinding?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would come before this group.
So those are
Put it in there. I don't know if it's what letters it got, but
right.
Yeah. So sometimes you ignore the letters, but
I mean, that's where I think this gives us a more expansive understanding of how the city is investing in transportation related projects.
Yeah.
And that could help us identify agenda topics and maybe areas where we need to be more assertive about our interest in that area, in that project.
Yes, I agree.
So
that can happen now.
Mhm.
Um,
They'll still serve us well for the rest of 2023.
correct.
So I do think how we could maybe salvage this, given that I blew the schedule, I could at least send out the resolutions to what Dave answered on our questions and concerns, and everybody can at least now know about it. I'll just say, don't reply. Here it is. It's just a news item. And then if you wish to comment as an individual to the city commission meeting, then feel free to do so. I may, depending on what the answers are. I won't be speaking for the entire commission though, because there may be items that we disagree on. So if that's a reasonable kind of compromise, we can just go with that and just, I mean, they'll probably be lost among the deluge of things about the Prairie Park Nature Center, but you never know. Some might make it through, right? So, anyway, that sounds like a decent approach to me. Does anybody have any comments, questions on that one, or think that's probably good at this point? Okay. I see Michael Allman has his hand raised, so I figure we can do a quick public comment before we recess. Michael, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you. And you run it down to the wire. I really do want to take my full 3 minutes if I can.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you. As far as the Wakarusa extension goes, it doesn't really need to be in the form of a letter to the city commission at this point. The city commission has already backed out of that. What you could do at this point about that is if you refer to the project detail sheet, which is page 8, it has a description of the project for the west leg expansion, but then the justification box just below that has it for the bridge, cooperating with the county, maintenance. So it actually still is in the CIP in that justification description. What you could do, and you have the authority to do this, is instruct staff to revise that so it does not say it extends to the to 458 and the bridge. So that's one thing that you really can do right now. The other thing I want to talk about, the 6th Street rebuild for $2,100,000 in 2023. I totally support Chair Kuzmiak's suggestion that you have a session with the city engineer to look over that and redesign it so it's not just a repaving, but it reconfigures the street for better multimodal. Just because East 23rd Street is being redesigned with multimodal because it was falling apart doesn't mean falling apart is the only reason that you redesign a street. You might want to redesign 6th Street, and I encourage what Commissioner Kuzmiak said, to get better multimodal. Somebody who is bicycling and they're shunted up to 5th Street to get around 6th Street, that's fine if they're risk averse, and most people are, but that does absolutely nothing for somebody who has a destination on 6th Street. They need a safe way to bicycle all along 6th Street to the banks, the fast food restaurants, whatever's there that they want to go to. So I really encourage you to work with the city engineer to have a session and look at reconfiguring it. If nothing else, the center turn lane right now is 14 feet wide. You could get a couple, 3 feet right there if you need it. But just look at the whole thing. And then final comment, the electric street sweeper MS 5000, it's highlighted in here, but what is not highlighted is RR 230002, which is, that's the sweeper. 5000, that's the electric vehicle infrastructure. That's the first page.
At halfway down.
Anyway, yeah. So that is definitely as much transportation infrastructure as the multimodal transfer facility. It's enabling transportation with the facility as charging stations is what that means. And it's funded. So that's something to really celebrate because Lawrence is definitely on track to electrify for all kinds of reasons, financial if nothing else. So those are my comments, and thank you for the time. I went a little bit over.
That's okay. Thank you, Michael. Okay. That does bring up a point, I guess. But the Wakarusa extension. Dave, did you catch what sheet that was on? Because I didn't quite hear exactly where Michael was.
Page 14
Of which attachment?
of our agenda
Of the 91.
document.
Okay. The project sheets?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I'm struggling to get here.
No, the
I must be on the wrong one. Sorry.
MMTC agenda packet.
Okay, the actual agenda packet. There's a lot of
Hold
versions.
it up here on my screen, on the screen.
Okay, thanks. Seriously. Okay, so this project sheet is for just SLT improvements in general. Okay. And it includes the extension of Wakarusa as number one. I guess I haven't been following City Commission closely enough to know what Michael means by backing out. Did the City Commission defer this or something? Do you know what the status is right now?
I'm unaware of any action that's occurred on this.
Yeah, me too.
Basically, the structure of this was for our local cost share. We're going to put up $7 million, and so we could still provide KDOT the funding and not participate in that actual project if the commission so desired.
Yeah. But we're still on the hook for the funding.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but yeah, the total amount here includes those three improvements there in the description. Those are estimated costs that got to the 7 million.
Thoughts? When you mentioned the 33rd and Iowa bicycle crossing as a possible KDOT thing, I don't know if I heard you wrong. Did you say something about that possibly being one of the funding match projects for this thing, or just entirely different pot of money?
Yeah, it's not possible out of this pot of money. Already asked that question.
Okay.
But yeah, just if there's any other opportunities or cost share or other programs that we can get it done with the SLT improvements, it would be the right time to do it would be with that project. So,
okay. Like construction timing wise, I guess, just because the interchange would be reconstructed anyway. So, okay. Correct.
Yeah. They're working on design plans and, right now. So,
does anyone else find it odd that that KDOT was totally cool with approving an extension a couple of miles to the south of their highway, but not an additional bike access road literally at the intersection of the highway where intersection improvements are happening? It seems odd to me, but I don't know if I just don't understand their priorities. I mean, we've talked to their bike ped people before and they seem pretty with it, but that seems like a really odd choice to say no to the bike bridge, or I guess the bike and pedestrian bridge, but yes to something that doesn't have any effect on them at all.
Well, the conversation included that KDOT closed access at Castled.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, when that happened in 2018, 2017, that's when the city and the county originally put the project in the CIP. We both put it in our CIPs to start planning ahead to say, when the time comes and this maybe moves forward to construction, it would be the right time to extend that road. And, there was a lot of opposition to closing access at Castled. And so back then that's what we pointed to, that Wakarusa was in our long range plan to extend at some point. And that kind of helped justify, closing Castled, was that, there would be this future connection. So,
okay.
That was really the what KDOT saw we, proposed to include, because, the city cost share dollars are going to city and county infrastructure and not, to pavement on K10. So, that's the conversation we had with them, and that's the I guess the justification or the rationale for them to include it. So.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So it sounds like, given the timing and the fact that the budget's going to be approved before we have our next meeting, maybe not, right? Then we need to decide if this is something that we feel strongly enough about that we want to actually pen a recommendation from MMTC to City Commission to exclude this from the budget, I guess. So
It'd be a recommendation to provide the funds, but go without building the road, basically.
right. So I know we're kind of at time, and this is kind of unorthodox, but because I feel like Michael has information, would anybody be opposed to letting him have maybe a 1 minute rebuttal or clarification? If it helps, I think it'll be a relatively short regular agenda tonight. So are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'd like to hear.
All right. Michael, if you can keep it to like 1 or 2 minutes, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Even less. What
Awesome.
the City Commission did on the 21st of June when they received the first CIP, Vice Mayor Larson was very strong in saying she does not want to fund the Wakarusa extension and the bridge. It's outside the city limits, and it potentially could push urban sprawl. The mayor agreed with that, and Commissioner Finkeldye, what he said was, well, we need to keep the $7 million in there, but we just won't say it's a cost share at this point. So if you look at the line item, MS 220029, it doesn't say Wakarusa extension anymore. It says SLT improvements. So that's what the City Commission did. Thank you.
Okay. That seems to track. Yeah. So now it just says SLT trafficway improvements, and originally it said.
Well, the Wakarusa extension was previous years. That's what it was. And after the spring and our discussions with KDOT, that project was revised. And it was revised prior to the City Commission meeting because it included more than just the Wakarusa extension to the south.
Right. It was also the Farmers Turnpike and the 33rd Street, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
Dave's saying is the staff actually revised the name. That wasn't the City Commission that did that.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was some discussion at that meeting about whether it's in the roads in the city or the county, and it's Wakarusa extended on the city-county line.
Right. So
it could be shifted over. It likely will be shifted over into the county portion to if it was being built, because that's better for crossing the river. But yeah.
All right. Well, I guess in that case, the question is, do we want to pen a letter siding with Commissioners Larson and Shipley, I guess, Mayor and Vice Mayor, with their desire to remove that part of the CIP project? Do we comment individually, or do we leave it be? I think those are kind of our three options here.
Are you proposing we put that on our meeting agenda? We're still in the study session right now.
We can't take that action.
I guess we could. Is it possible to add something to the agenda at the last minute? We've never done that before that I'm aware of.
You can put something on there.
Okay.
Yep.
Would you guys mind doing that so we can have a break and then start at a reasonable around the normal time? Maybe a fairly quick discussion, hopefully. Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we'll cover that when we get to the actual agenda, and I know where to do that.
You just do under commission items.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. That sounds good to me. Any dissent, I guess, or can we just save that for commission items? Cool. Okay. In that case, let's call this meeting to a close. Thanks everybody for the discussion. Thanks, Dave, for the action or the answers and the prep work. Should we reconvene at 6:25? Too late?
That works.
All right. 6:25 it is. See you all in a bit. regularly scheduled agenda for the August MMTC meeting. And since I forgot to do this last time, we're going to start by calling roll. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And since we did the preamble on the study session, we should be good for there. So we'll just move into our agenda. So first is approve minutes from the July meeting. Does anybody have any revisions, concerns, questions, anything? Okay, well, in that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the July 6th minutes.
Make a motion to approve the July 6th minutes for MMTC.
Okay. Commissioner Collette has made a first pass. A second?
I'll second.
And Commissioner Baltuska as the second.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Our next section is general public comment. So I'll just read the blurb so anybody who's intending to make a public comment is aware of what the rules are. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the regular agenda. Public comment will not be received for staff items, commission items, or calendar. Each person or organization will be limited to 3 minutes. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss nor debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented at this time. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, or I guess call on over the phone, sign in, state their name and address, and speakers should address all comments to the commission. Since there's nobody in the room, we'll go to online. Does anybody online have any general public comment? It's not looking like it. Okay. In that case, we're moving on to agenda item D. I'm going to start with part 1, receive background on the shared scooter pilot program and provide feedback.
All right. As some of you remember from a couple of years ago that were around, we started looking into electric scooters. A couple of things we were looking into regulations on those that we eventually adopted by city ordinance for operation of electric assisted scooters in the city of Lawrence. We also had a conversation on starting a pilot program, which was to be a 6-month pilot program for a vendor to operate a shared scooter program in the city of Lawrence. And so there was this board had a committee, the micromobility committee, that worked with staff to kind of outline a few things that we were looking for in an RFQ. We went through that process end of 2019 and early 2020, the RFQ process, to receive applications, and worked with KU to evaluate them. And ultimately, we were getting ready to proceed with Bird with that pilot program. And then COVID-19 hit, and people stopped sharing things. And so we kind of put it on hold. And really, it's been on, it's been on hold since then. And I know that Bird has reached out several times here, and they have recently attended a meeting and spoke and asked to restart the conversation on a shared scooter pilot program. And so that's kind of why we're talking about it here tonight. So I wanted to give particularly those new board members a little bit of a background on the process that we had gone through a couple of years ago. and maybe have a conversation on what we need to do if we need to if we want to move forward with this. So since we've kind of left it at the beginning of 2020, we haven't. Staff hasn't looked into it at all anymore as far as pursuing it. It's just based off the things that we've been working on, it hasn't been a priority. We haven't done any community engagement the past couple of years. We did meet with downtown Lawrence businesses back then, but we haven't renewed any of those conversations. There was some concerns back then about operation and parking and speeds and time and those sorts of things downtown, and those were things that we were still kind of outstanding back then. That would have we intended to work through within an agreement with the vendor, as well as KU. So KU hasn't been pushing for the program either, but they indicated they would be a partner if the city wanted to pursue it in the future. So they were in the conversations a couple of years ago. So like I mentioned, we haven't really kept up with changes in the industry, and certainly things may have changed since we looked at it last. So we had some conversations a couple of years ago about sustainability and how long the scooters would last, and if they're really sustainable or not. So those were conversations that we had. Back then we were also looking at how does that tie into the bike share program that we had. So VO Ride was our bike share operator that we had, and they were also one of the vendors interested in the electric scooters, and they ended up discontinuing the bike share program right when COVID hit. But so anyway, it was just a little different time, and so we were back then trying to look at kind of tying into that program and how this program may work in the future. So that's kind of really just a general background of the process we went through. I attached to the agenda some of the previous reports and in the links there to agenda items that we had in the past, and just as a additional background if for those that were interested. And I attached the RFQ that we had drafted back in 2019 for the program. And I guess going forward, I think in my opinion, if we're gonna pursue this, and if it is a priority, I think we need to determine if it is a community priority or not. I'm not hearing from anyone in the public saying where are the shared scooters. So I think that needs to be a conversation that we need to have if we're thinking about moving forward. Is is there a benefit, and does it meet some of the outcomes in our strategic plan? And so obviously I see them in other communities. So I know they're out there, and certainly could be some positive things for them. But that's something that I think that we would need to do if we were serious about moving forward. And so, and like I said, we've been kind of put it on the back burner with all the other work that we've got going on. And so I would have some concerns about just our staff capacity to take it on right at this time. And I don't know if it would necessarily be. I'm not sure who would own it within the city, but across the city we've got a lot of initiatives going on and a lot of work going on. And so right now it's just not a high priority for us, but it certainly could be in the future. And yeah, so that's a little bit of the background. And I know Mike with Bird is here and probably wants to say a few things. And that's really all I have. And I'll stand for any questions that any of you have.
All right. I'm thinking it might make sense to turn it over to Mike at this point, just to kind of, I guess, add if there's any additional questions. Mike, do you think it'd be possible to keep it to maybe 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, it could be even less, and I think opening it up to a Q&A is certainly okay. And for those who don't know me, my name is Mike Butler. I head up many of our city programs and government partnerships that we have, specifically in this region. So, as David had mentioned, there was an RFQ that went out a couple of years ago. After the committee had reviewed that, ultimately they decided that we were the business that was best posed to provide that service to both KU and the Lawrence community. Of course, COVID got in the way of that, but our enthusiasm and our optimism of to bring the service to Lawrence, that remains true. I think there's a lot of there can be a lot of local support out there that we've actually received. We've even received support from the SGA at KU that even sent Dave Cronin a letter of support talking about how they were supportive bringing this business to their campus and the community and advocating for this. So there certainly is I would say interest in this. I can certainly appreciate the fact that you're probably not receiving dozens of letters every day saying, hey, where are the scooters? I think you'd probably be the first city in the world where that was the case. But what I can say is that there are cities out there that haven't received any type of initial support for this, but after evaluation decided that this was something they wanted to move forward because of the many benefits that this can bring. And so, I think that's really all we wanted to say was to talk about how optimistic we are about this and how enthusiastic we are to bring in the service to the community. And I'm happy to answer any and all questions or address any comments that the commission might have.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Let's bring it to the commission for now for any, I guess, initial technical questions. And then once we get those out of the way, we'll go to the public for any public comment. So anybody up here have any initial thoughts, questions, concerns?
Yeah, what I see it was addressed during the original look through. What are you going to do about the fact that city code right now doesn't allow for scooters on sidewalks downtown?
Well, that was something that
Big deal.
yeah, something we talked about, and that they would need to be in the street downtown, just like a bicycle would be.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, the same regulations that apply to bicycles apply to the electric assisted scooters.
Okay, it looks like there wasn't any way to no code compliance or anything. That was something that needed to be worked out compliance because people on scooters are going to be on the sidewalks.
There is some ability to do some geofencing in some areas to keep them out of areas, but I don't know if it's evolved to the specificity of keeping them off of the sidewalk that's adjacent to a street. But those are things that we had talked about, in the past. And I think that's the side, there certainly is, it would be run by, the vendor would be responsible for it and running the program, but there's, certainly some staff time in responding to things like enforcement. If someone is on a sidewalk downtown, that we would have some concerns about, but, it's a good question.
One of the questions I have, I guess, at the time that this was considered, we had a bike share program. And, if we were to relaunch this kind of investigation and community engagement, would we limit it to discussion of scooters or a combination of scooters and bike share?
Yeah, that's a great question. It could certainly be both if there's a way to tie them together.
It's like, engaging the community as well as, KU. And, I know that there was a micro mobility committee. Was that just made up of members of this commission and then outreach to KU and downtown, or how was that structured as far as the community engagement? Because that was before I came on.
Yeah, well, I can describe it a little bit. So the committee was myself, Steve Evans. I want to say Carol was on it. Who was the third? Charlie was.
I was on it.
Okay. And probably a fourth because Steve was just there as the chair at the time, but probably Carol. So at the time, we were basically working with Dave and one of the city attorneys and Derek Rogers from Parks and Rec. And I want to say Jenny O'Brien was on the committee as well from the staff side, and Jessica Mortinger of MPO was also involved. So there's pretty good staff involvement. I don't specifically recall how community engagement happened. I know that we spoke with sort of, I wouldn't even really call them stakeholders. For example, we had kind of an interview with, was it Omaha? Do you remember? About how their implementation of scooters went down and kind of gathered intel that way. But I don't recall how public engagement happened or if it did.
We didn't have a thorough engagement process for it. Our staff multimodal transportation team, we had some conversations and the same things that we talked about with the micromobility committee of the Transportation Commission. But we had a meeting with downtown Lawrence business owners, and that was about the extent. And we had discussions here.
And then KU, how was KU involved?
I remember somebody from the Student Senate came and spoke in favor of them, and that's all I recall.
Yeah, I believe so. And they were involved in reviewing the proposals, so they were on the team that reviewed the proposals and scored them.
And at the time, Donna Holting, who was the KU parking and transit manager, I think that was her title, was actively on MMTC, so she was at least aware of what's going on.
Okay.
So
yeah,
but I don't think there was ever like a committee to committee kind of engagement session.
Yeah, we had, KU had started the bike share program, and the city had kind of tagged on to that with an agreement. And it would have been kind of the same thing for this, that we would have probably initiated the agreement, and KU would have been included in it or tied on to it. So, but yeah, we didn't have any other meetings, I guess, or public hearings on whether or not we should have the scooters or not. There was just, there was interest back then when they were starting to come out.
And since it was a pilot, that could have happened after the pilot, so people had more information as well. But
okay, are there any other kind of general or technical questions from up here before we see if there's any members of the public who are going to comment?
I've got a quick one. So for that KU bike share program, did you say that was discontinued as a result of COVID-19, or was that just like a coincidence that stopped at about the same time?
Yeah. I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but the vendor, who was VioRide, chose to stop the program, and they had scrapped the bikes, and we didn't know that we're going to do that before, and basically took them all down to the landfill or the recycling facility and piled them up. So they kind of ended that. The vendor ended it on their own. We weren't aware of them going to do that, but it happened at the right as COVID was that spring of 2020 is when that happened. And that really just kind of ended that, they had some electric assisted bikes that they had introduced maybe a year or two before. But the majority of them were just normal pedal bikes, and it wasn't profitable enough for them, I guess, to continue the program. And that's the history. But yeah.
Was it deemed a success while it was running? I remember seeing a lot of them around and not feeling like it was a great look, but I appreciate the purpose.
I mean, I guess it depends on what your definition of success is. Did VioRide make money? It sounds like towards the end, possibly not. Did it get people out of their cars and onto bikes? Presumably. Did it clog up sidewalks? Yes. So there's kind of depends on which metric you're looking at as to whether it was a success or not. I'd be curious to know if that VRide program took up a lot of KU staff time, because I assume that they were administering it, right? So I would wonder, what kind of a lift was that for them? Or did they really just kind of Wild West it?
Yeah, I don't know about KU, but we received complaints when bikes were blocking sidewalks, and
Also, you just kind of discarded on the side of the street sometimes too.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Nick, if I wouldn't mind adding something, I would say that and I can't speak on behalf of VO, that's obviously not our business, and we run different operations and different technology. But what I can say is that the technology of both the vehicles and also on the software side, that when it comes to parking management, is astronomically different than probably what you had seen in let's say 2018. The industry has had so much maturity over those years. I mean, even at the time that we had initiated these conversations with Lawrence, we were probably live in a couple different cities in the US, and that was pretty much it. Today we're live in about 400 cities. So that's hundreds of millions of rides that people have taken, which are learning points, hundreds and hundreds of cities that we've interacted with and received a lot of feedback, and then taken that feedback and built it into the product and built it into safer vehicles. So again, I think there's been a lot of maturity over that time, which is why we're even more bullish on something like this. And I would assume that you probably wouldn't see the same type of, maybe negative things that you had heard, just because a lot of those things have been ironed out over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Mike. I think I'm probably going to have a couple of questions kind of related to what's changed after we get our public comment, because I have a feeling. Oh, sorry. Are you in? Oh, you're just watching. Okay. Sorry, I got confused for a second. Charlie was watching you from about 15 seconds ago. So anyway, so let's go to public comment for right now and see if there's anything that we need to pick up from elsewhere. Is anybody on the call or on the Zoom who would like to speak? Michael? You got 3 minutes.
Hi, yeah, Michael Allman again with Sustainability Action Network. Just to say that we support this micro mobility option for Lawrence. One of the concerns back in 2000 by some of the multimodal transportation commissioners was the embedded energy in these scooters or electric bicycles that doesn't warrant the amount of energy saved by using them, because they get wrecked or lost or thrown away or whatever. And so it is way too much energy to make the scooter that it actually saves. And I don't agree with that. That may be true on the face of it, but when you compare the amount of embedded energy in a 4,000-pound motor vehicle, and how many of those last more than 2 or 3 years before they're totaled, and then that all goes to the landfill, comparatively, the kind of energy to manufacture a scooter is order of magnitude less than an automobile, plus the amount of energy used for transportation, plus the amount of space necessary to park them. Downtown has a big parking problem, and they are focused, ridiculously focused on more motor vehicle parking spaces. They're always defending their motor vehicle park. Well, let's come up with some options. We can substitute micro mobility for a lot of those trips downtown and elsewhere. So I'd say, there could be some issues with logistics, with tracking them, leasing them, collecting them around town or whatever, but they are coming. They are coming. They're already here. Electric bicycles are here. Electric skateboards are here. Electric segways, the single person standing on an electric segway, they're zipping up and down the sidewalks of downtown right now. Not good. Go this way, take ownership of it and manage it properly so it works. So that's our perspective at Sustainability Action Network. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anybody else on the call who has a comment? does not appear to be the case. Okay. Well, we'll bring it back up here. And I guess I'm thinking we can make the best use of our time by asking sort of general comments about the industry that I think Mike can help us out with while we're here, or about Bird itself. And then after we feel that we're, have been satisfied with enough information to kind of understand how the landscape has changed a little bit, then we can maybe make a path forward of what do we do with this information. So does that sound like a reasonable course of action? Sounds good. All right. I'm going to just get the ball rolling here because I feel like these have been asked by others, so I may as well just kind of compile. So the first one is on geofencing accuracy. So I recall back when we were doing this back in 2019, there was concerns over the accuracy of being able to exactly fence scooters off from somewhere else. It was something like 6 feet plus or minus, which wasn't enough to prevent scooters from being on sidewalks. So it sounds like that may have improved.
Yeah, are you asking me, Nick?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, that's absolutely true. I think one of the biggest pieces, I think at the time, the vehicle that we had introduced was actually our first generation of a vehicle that was designed in-house specifically for rideshare. We're not our fourth generation of that. So we've taken this, similar design as what automobiles do, where every year they come out with a better vehicle, a more enhanced vehicle with better safety features. And we've taken that same thing. I think one of the biggest things that you'll notice, yes, on that geofencing side, is that candidly, back in the time, when we said, hey, we wanted a vehicle that could stop at a certain location or slow down, most of the time it works, but there was some wonkiness that would happen and some inaccuracy. That has been completely resolved to the point where we can actually get parking and geozoning down to a centimeter. So what we did is, instead of having a vehicle that had to send its GPS coordinates up to the cloud back to the vehicle, by that time there was a lag of about 6 seconds, which is why you saw some of those. We've actually embedded that map into the vehicle itself to make down to the very second where it is. So that means if you're running on a certain street, or you've entered a park, or you've entered somewhere on campus, that vehicle is going to slow down exactly where it needs to be to a certain speed, or stop entirely, come to a halt, and that rider needs to be notified that they've entered a zone that they're not allowed to be. And so those are things that we're doing reactively. And then proactively, it's a matter of engaging the public, educating them on where they can, where they can't ride, where they can park, where they can't, and things of that nature.
Cool. That's kind of what I was hoping to hear. And it's good to know that the technology has improved. I guess I'm also kind of curious to go into the logistics side of that question. And that is, who defines the geofences? Who does the initial work to kind of draw it out in GIS or wherever it would be drawn?
Well, yeah, we'll work with the city. So typically, let's say today, for example, the mayor or city manager signed a contract with us. We would work for about 4 to 5 weeks on a pre-launch phase, where we take feedback or input from the city or from local organizations, or from KU, for example, to define those locations. Those are things that you can tell us. We can provide feedback, and it can be very collaborative. And then from that point, it's not just a set and forget it, right? If there are things that come up, if there are games, for example, that happen on campus, if there's construction that's happening, if there are events, if there are parades, if you give us about 24 to 40 hours advance notice, we can reprogram the vehicles accordingly and reset some of those parameters. So we give you access to a dedicated point person. That's probably why there actually isn't a ton of staff time required for this. I know that's a major concern of that hey, scooters aren't a priority and we don't have time for that. I completely understand it. Scooters in any town are never a priority. That's just the reality of it. So I think what we've done is we've been able to build a lot of playbooks based on our experience with cities that minimize staff time that's required for this, and educate citizens to come to us if they ever have questions or comments or things that need to be resolved, right? They shouldn't be bothering David or the city engineering team or public works. They should be bothering us, because that's our job.
Okay. Thanks for the info. Let's see. So it sounds like you already touched on the next question I had, which was generally local administration and responsiveness. So I think back in 2019, the general gist was that e-scooter companies had kind of a hotline you could call to make sure that, hey, these scooters aren't being picked up in time, they're not being charged fast enough. Is that still sort of the same thing, or has a model evolved in the past few years?
We give a boatload of different ways to get in touch with us. A phone call is probably the most responsive, but there's also ways you can get in touch with us over our website, over an app. Every vehicle actually has stickered on there a phone call, a chat line, and email that you can use. And so all of that can be taken to us, and then that's triage actually down to a local contractor or probably a few local representatives here. So these are fleet managers is what we call them. It's entirely their business to resolve some of these issues. It's entirely their business to actively manage this fleet. And by doing so, they actually share the revenue with us. So they're incentivized to doing so. That's the carrot form, but the stick form is if anything needs to come up and needs to be resolved, we come up with quick action ways to resolve those in minutes as opposed to hours or days. So again, that's another advancement in operations, is having a local individual who, I think similar to everyone in this room, they don't want their streets cluttered. They don't want a level of untidiness. They live here too. They're probably a neighbor of yours. And so I think there's a lot of community pride that's tied to it, but also some financial incentives.
Okay, good to know. All right. Has the overall business model changed? So I think originally it was the vendor who owned the scooters and, had them operated by consumers who would then pay directly to the vendor. Sorry. I don't know if there was something in our RFQ that was going to be like a cut of the thing went to the city. I forget how that was structured, but I mean, does the business model change from city to city, or is it generally a pretty standardized thing that you try to enact?
Yeah, I think we definitely try to keep a layer of consistency. And I think that's because there's probably residents that live in Lawrence or students that travel elsewhere and have used the service before and are familiar with the service and specifically have used our business and then seen and come back to Lawrence and obviously not be able to see it. But it's all application based. You're paying for it basically by the minute. So the longer you're taking your ride, the higher the fare is going to be. We have some discount programs available for certain students, senior citizens, healthcare workers, folks that are enrolled in government assistance programs. So our goal is trying to make this as affordable as possible, because we know public transportation sometimes may be affordable, but may not be reliable. And so we try to marry the two. But you are correct that a portion of this revenue can be given back to the city. In fact, we suggested that. We said, hey, we're going to give you a portion of every ride revenue because we feel like that's the right thing to do because we're using your right of way. And we feel like that helps promote the city advancing its bicycle and pedestrian network, which has been a huge topic of even this conversation. So we're trying to give back to you, and hopefully you can take some of that money. Maybe it can offset some cost time or some time from staff, but also maybe that can help stripe out new bike lanes in certain areas, that can put down a bike rack in an area that previously didn't have it. So I think improving that infrastructure is equally as important to this.
Okay, cool. All right. So the new development, it seems, in shared mobility has been electric bikes. I mean, they've always kind of been around, but they're huge all of a sudden. So it looks like bird traffic's in those. Is that the kind of thing that you would consider for a city the size of Lawrence, or is that more reserved for larger cities?
No, I think it's a case-to-case basis. I completely agree. The electric bike has taken off tremendously on the retail side of it for an individual. For some reason, on the rental side of it, 19 out of 20 people are going to prefer to ride a scooter. Okay. We can say that because that's what the data says. There's probably something to do with the fact you're not pedaling and it's easier to use, or if you're wearing a dress or heels, sometimes it's hard to pedal a bike, but pretty easy just to stand on a scooter. So I think most of the time users are going to prefer for a scooter. That doesn't mean that we can't add bikes, because there probably are some trips that happen that a bike is probably the right thing to do. And so I think we're happy to find a ratio that makes sense. But my assumption would be if we were again to start tomorrow, for example, you'd see a much heavier ratio of scooters to bikes.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, guys, I'm almost done. So the final thing is the life cycle consideration for a scooter. So I recall a few years ago, there was a whole bunch of articles, showing stuff like all these scooters are being thrown in landfills and the batteries are just degrading and we can't recycle lithium. Could you just comment on any, advances that have been made either in battery recycling, longevity of the materials, stuff like that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think we're a company that touts itself as being a sustainability company. And in the early days, it was difficult to have our scooters be on the road for even longer than a few months. And that was because the vehicles that we were using were not designed to be used for the kind of ruggedness that you would see for a sharing system like that. Instead, they were used for kind of single-use scooters. So that's why we've gone to such great lengths to design vehicles and improve on those vehicles to make sure that they last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. You know, some of the vehicles that we launched in 2018, they're still on the road today. That's the idea. That's the goal. So I think the useful life for a vehicle that we would deploy in Lawrence, for example, is probably anywhere between 3 to 5 years. We've also done some interesting things on the sustainability side to find second and third life, specifically for the battery. That's typically the mechanism of the scooter that's probably most difficult to recycle. So we've worked with a lot of local agencies, specifically in Los Angeles, to find second and third lives for those batteries. And I think anything that we can do to extend that life, anything that we can do to be more sustainable is huge. And I think the biggest one there is getting cars off the road. 49% of every car trip taken in the US is between 1 and 3 miles. That means hundreds of thousands of trips are taken to Lawrence every year that probably people should be walking or biking or scootering. And so we're not saying all of those trips should be a bike ride or a scooter ride, but maybe if even 10% or 20% of those are, that's a step in the right direction.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to give it over to other people who probably have questions as well. So
I just have one question about the pilot that we had proposed. I noticed in Overland Park, their pilot was going to continue for over a year. And I'm wondering if the 6-month time frame is reasonable. Mike, can you give us any input on pilot programs that you've been involved in across the country?
Yeah, I'd say the overwhelming majority are a year. I think that's typically due to the fact that you see more of a holistic look into the success of the program. 6 months, sometimes it's really difficult. Either success is too high or maybe too low. I think depending on when you're implementing this, when the student population is there, you may see a difference in utilization. But I think in the case for both Olathe and Overland Park, those pilot programs were over a year, and I worked with both of those cities. So that's my suggestion. Again, I think 6 months we would take it, but most cities are doing 12 at least.
Thank you.
I have a question in terms of starting a pilot project with a student population, and when's an ideal time to do that in terms of a cycle? Are you thinking, and especially I guess with weather patterns too. So is it something that would typically be best to launch in August or September, or would second semester be a possibility as well? Or, what is the best indicator of success of the program?
Yeah, I don't want necessarily for that to stop us. If there was an appetite to begin this program this year, I think we'd be there tomorrow if you needed us. I think that's really what we're trying to do. So I don't think it's necessary that, if we started in September versus February, that would change things much. At least in that time, you get an entire year. And that's probably a pretty good indication of the efficacy of the program. But yeah, I wouldn't say one season is necessarily better than the other. We know we run a seasonal business. We operate in Canada and Nordic countries and places that are much bleaker than Lawrence in the wintertime.
Any other questions from the commission or from staff for that matter? Okay. Here's where I'm at. I feel like we need to get a path forward of some sort. I think we have a lot of interesting information. I don't know. I guess I should pose the general question. I would assume that there's some sort of general desire. I don't know what the priority is among MMTC commissioners that we should at least pursue this, since we've tried it before and got deferred. So is there anybody who really thinks this is not something we should be working on at all? Okay, that's a good start. So now that we're there, here are the things I think we could do to kind of get things going. I want to first find out from staff side, kind of how you forecast your ability to either help us run a new micromobility committee or help us with stakeholder engagement, or even which entity it should be. I mean, it could be Parks and Rec, it could be KU, MPO. There's a couple different entities that could take this over. It doesn't necessarily have to be MSO, I'm thinking. So it might be good to get those folks in the same room and just decide, like, how can we do this? So that would help to kind of define our timeline, I think, to kind of know who's opening up and who would take ownership. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've had that conversation with our multimodal transportation team across departments, and we have not identified the capacity or anyone to take it over right now, just with all the projects and things that are going on. And so that's, as we're kind of weighing, what works important and what we're doing. That's the most challenging thing, I think, for moving this forward, is making sure that we do the proper, thorough community engagement and a review before we roll something out, or it may fail if we don't do that.
So that was my other big one, is I think it would be helpful to try to reform the shared micromobility committee that we have back in 2019. It won't be the same people because only 2 of us are left, but to try to figure out how to engage stakeholders. I think Downtown Transit Center kind of ran into the same issue where it was just assumed, like, yeah, we're just going to have a transit center. There's already one, right? Without really doing the stakeholder engagement. And that was a big issue. Once they actually got down to it, a lot of downtown businesses really didn't support, in some cases, even the idea of transit, but in other cases, just the exact location and the scope of it. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least try to do some engagement with, especially DLI, but also with KU and I guess whoever else might have to be involved, the police. So I do think that having a new committee, or I guess a reformed committee, could probably help. Instead of having staff do all that, we could at least try to direct things. I don't know. And then I do think eventually we'll probably want to do a, kind of resurrect this pilot thing. I do think we should definitely do a new RFQ. There are some companies have gone under, some have emerged. The technology is different. The governance is different. I think we should just redo the RFQ at some point. Obviously not release it yet until we kind of know who's going to administer, what the stakeholders think, but it's something we could do kind of in the meantime. To do that, it seems like it would be effective to send the current RFQ to Bird and other companies and just have them kind of redline it, say, like, no, that doesn't exist anymore. This is obsolete. This is something new you should consider, and kind of meld all the technical experts' kind of opinions and takes on the technology into a single coherent document that would make sense to reissue. So, saying all that, it sounds like our biggest roadblock is going to be staff time. And given how many open positions are at the city right now, it sounds like that's kind of public knowledge at this point. Like, there's just not enough staff to do all the work that has to be done, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've got a full workload, and we are challenged with staffing. And one thing I was just thinking about that we had been working on, community engagement, was a brick policy, brick sidewalks, brick streets, and we have said we've had 2 different project managers of that who have left, and right now that's been put on pause, and just because if we're gonna do it, we got to do it right, and I haven't had the capacity to complete that. So that's just one example, but there's a lot going on. I think ultimately, at least in my opinion, it probably lands in parking and transit at some point. But they're doing a lot of work in parking and transit right now. So putting kiosks downtown and working on the transfer facility, and the next thing's the downtown project, and so they've kind of got a full plate. So that's I think the challenge. I think after going through the engagement to determine if we want to have this program in Lawrence, is who runs it. But I think that's something that could be figured out later. But I think it's just from my perspective, it's just starting the process over again, because I'm in agreement that it's been 2 years, 2.5, and that we would probably get others that would submit if we put an RFQ out. Things have changed, and I think that would be my recommendation if the community wanted to move forward with with a program.
Yeah. I mean, on the plus side, a lot of things have changed in a positive direction. So like earlier concerns over sustainability of the batteries are less. Earlier concerns over no way to monitor or enforce, illegal riding on the sidewalk, that may have been fixed, which is really cool because that was one of the biggest issues that we kept running into is like, how do we geofence within a reasonable accuracy? I don't know if I heard you correctly. Have you engaged with KU yet, or have you not been able to? Okay. Because I almost wonder if maybe they could be an administrator, kind of like they are with the transit system. And then perhaps later, parking and transit could kind of glom onto them, which is, I think, exactly how it went with transit, right?
Well, I mean, definitely they will be a partner in it. And I think they're open if we want to proceed with it. But the reality is a lot of the scooters are going to be in the city. They'll be on KU campus too, but KU can't control the scooters that are downtown or anywhere else. So,
well, they really couldn't control with a VO ride. I mean, that was their administration. And because there weren't any geofences, they were all over the place, right? So at least with this, they would be able to say like, well, working with the city as a partner, here's where the geofencing could go. It's a lot more control than they used to have, at least. I don't know.
Can I get a question for Mike? If you're still online there.
Yeah.
Is the geofencing accuracy, is that something that's also now available on your bikes, or is it just on the scooters?
Yeah, it's for both vehicles.
Okay. So my inclination is that transit is probably the right home for this sort of work.
Sure.
And I was wondering when you're bringing up KU, if the student senate has shown interest in this, if they have any interest in hiring a student who could kind of spearhead the coordination of a community engagement, if that would help at all with staff limitations, or if there's a need for us to try to find money for an intern that the city could hire along with all the other open positions, to kind of dedicate someone in the next year to be able to really get this off the ground. I mean, I just imagine this is not a high priority with staff. So it's kind of like, who is it a high priority for? That's where the student senate might come in.
I think KU would benefit
and
by far.
They probably want to see it happen tomorrow, but if we give them kind of clarity on a nice timeline and plan it out, engage not just the students at KU, but also in particular our downtown association. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest destination for people is going to be downtown. And how does it not become an eyesore or just a litter problem, essentially? They can get ahead of that and get the downtown area bought into that this would be a benefit to them. That would go a long way, I think, to dealing with people's fear about it being another VO ride situation.
Do we think that since it's a pilot program, it might even be appropriate while transit and parking is dealing with the immediate issue of the transit center, if KU could just run the pilot and just administer it, should they have the bandwidth and the desire to do so? I mean, it is odd having something that's all city being governed by a university that is kind of an island sometimes. But on the other hand, that's exactly what transit used to be. So there is a precedent for it. It's not like this is completely out of left field.
What about the possibility of, at least for some of the groundwork leading up to that, of pursuing like the urban planning class that is the practicum class, and I don't remember what number that is, but it's do a complete project in terms of feasibility and doing the stakeholder involvement and that kind of thing. And I don't know whether that's offered in the fall or the spring. I haven't followed that recently, so I don't know for sure. But all of the master's students are or a certain number of them within the class, or it can be a whole class project. As far as looking at it as a project for doing the update on some of the the regulations and the community involvement and some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that's possible if KU and KU students wanted to help take the lead, the city could partner with them.
We can maybe talk to Lisa Koch and see if she has some ideas.
And if I can make a recommendation, I would heavily recommend the city not open up an RFQ for this. I think one of the resounding things that we're hearing, at least this theme, is that staff time is relatively limited. Opening it up to an RFQ probably adds at the low end 8 weeks and at the high end sometimes 16 weeks to redline something like that, to interview vendors, to go through the that permitting process. And it sounds like the city staff doesn't have that right now. So our recommendation is, again, to view this as a pilot program, take the feedback, take the learnings that you're getting from the 6, 9, 12 months, whatever we decide on, and you can take that feedback and then include that in an RFP at the end of this. Assuming that you do want to extend this and you do feel like there's value, you'll take all the feedback that you've gained over 12 months and you can add things that are specific to KU, specific to Lawrence, as opposed to putting out a generic RFQ that may not make a ton of sense and may need to be amended down the road.
Dave, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I spoke earlier about that, but I think it's been 2 years and I know it would take more work, but I feel like if we didn't go through the process again, it's been, things have changed and there will be I've gotten contacted by other vendors the past couple of years that didn't submit, asking if Lawrence was interested in scooters, and I'm sure there would be others that would be interested in submitting. And so I think it would be hard for us to take something that's 2.5 years old and then a process that we went through and then say, well, we want to start this now. And I don't know. And I don't know enough right now to know what's changed. And, just to say, okay, well, let's just go. And so I'd just be really concerned about doing that. And if we want to be successful, that we probably just need to do some more research, whether it's KU or someone else, to see if what best practices have changed and how to make it successful.
Yeah. And I would say, regardless of how long an RFQ takes to fix and get out and to evaluate bits and everything, we still do need time to actually do the real stakeholder engagement that wasn't done last time, that probably should be done. I'm just feeling like general lessons learned from city decisions I've seen past 5 years or so. When there isn't any stakeholder engagement and something gets done and people don't like it, it blows up. So I feel like if we didn't have a transparent, open process to try to select, the best that we can, I don't think that would go over particularly well with people. Even if it ends up being a benefit, like perception is reality, right? So if there's any perception of kind of, political favorites or opacity in the selection process, I don't think it would go over very well. So, like as much as I appreciate, Mike, all your input, and I do think Bird is very well positioned, probably, I just think to make sure that we're following the correct process, to kind of respect our citizens, we're probably going to have to go through an RFQ again for a couple of reasons. So, Dave, it sounds like then you would be okay with maybe continuing to kind of revise the original RFQ to update it, maybe in the methods I suggested by getting, technical and logistical suggestions from vendors. Maybe reconvening the Share Micro Mobility Committee in the meantime to help shepherd that along and to figure out how to kick off the stakeholder engagement process, all the while knowing that we can't really pull the trigger until we know who's going to take ownership of it. So do you think this could happen side by side, or does there have to be a sequence here?
Well, I think this sequence would be to start with the community engagement first and determine that there's a need and a want for the community to move forward with it. And then it can happen simultaneous, but to have a review of regulations, and we want to put out an RFQ and then have a conversation with KU on how much they can be involved to partner with it, particularly since the student senate's interested in interested in it or most vocal or really the only one we first from. If there's our possibility for KU to take the lead in it, that would go a long way, I think. But certainly it's going to take some staff time to coordinate, just, on the city side and downtown with downtown Lawrence and with a legal agreement and I think, just looking at like what, defining success for the program, like how do we measure that and with all of our things in the strategic plan and equity and sustainability, and how do we, how does it tie into our, moving forward on some of our outcomes. So I think that
would probably be up to some of the work of the micro mobility subcommittee or just committee, because I don't think we did that last time. It was really define metrics and objectives and how do we measure the success even. So
yeah, we talked about it a little, but I don't know if we really.
Yeah.
I think it was still there. There was a lot of things that we had talked about that we didn't really decide. That was still kind of open ended, and I think that those are things that we probably want to make sure we do a better job of closing the loop before we start it. Because I've just seen things that we started things, and if we don't, have the ability to keep it moving, that it just stalls out. So, I'm not trying to say it's not important or we shouldn't talk about it at some point, but that's just, I think the reality right now with what we got going on. So, I'd be happy to reach out to KU, see how much they want to, be included in this, and if they have the ability to take the lead, maybe.
I do think that'd be a really important first step, because that would determine the timeline. Because if they can't, then staff definitely can't over the next 6 months to a year, right? But if KU can, then that could move up our timeline considerably. And then we could probably get to work on, additional research engagement. Otherwise, there's probably not as much of a rush if nobody can administer it. So
I guess the other question I would just have for the board is if there's a group that's interested in helping, if think it's important that we really start looking at this seriously again, to maybe get a group together and look at what we've done and what's changed or not changed, and give us some recommendations that may help as well.
Yeah, I think if we have the volunteer input for that, we should. But I guess that's a question. If we were to reconvene the shared micromobility committee, would anybody be interested in serving on it? I know we have a lot of committees right now, and a lot of involvement. So we're currently doing T2050, ZU2.
Mm-hmm.
Land development update, steering committee is me. There's still the codes, or what's the one that you two are on, the like MMTC goals and
or the evaluation one.
Yeah, which is sort of in hiatus, I guess, right now, right? But it's still out there.
Yeah, it's out. I mean, it's in hiatus, but we're kind of waiting on the metrics for strategic plans. So hopefully that will get going here, before too much longer. But
okay. And then we have our ad hoc committee to do the CIP, which is going to be over soon. So I guess. Well,
then plus we have
there's another one.
Something on the.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Climate action plan.
Yeah. So, is there anybody who either feels strongly enough or just wants to get involved in something that's kind of fresh here? I guess refresh to look into micro mobility. Even just 2 people would be good enough, right, Dave? Like just some contingent to kind of help move things along. Probably be fine. Not really worried about.
I'm very interested in.
Awesome.
That's what
I want to hear. Thanks for making my job easy. Is there anybody else on the commission who would be interested in taking this up? I remember being kind of a fun time back in 2019.
It was.
We had vigorous discussions. It was nice. So, but I'm not going to be doing it because I think the land development code update is going to be significant. So there's only so much of these I can do.
I want to say, I think it'd be interesting to look at e-scooters, but also just talk about bikes, e-bikes. I mean, there's so many elements that it'd be good to kind of look at, what are we going to end up doing combination? And there's a lot out there about how you're going to reduce the number of cars, the number of parking spaces you need. I mean, some of the things I've been looking at, there's a lot of benefits, unbelievable benefits. So it'd be good to think about where we want to go with that in general.
Yeah, we definitely struggled at first to kind of narrow down our scope because it started as just the shared micro mobility, or maybe just micro mobility, which include like the single wheel skateboards, electric skateboards, mini bikes, rascal scooters, like everything. We thought, all right, we gotta whittle this down a little bit to focus on what is probably most important, which at the time, and probably again, is shared e-scooters, but shared e-bikes could also be important. So it's good to kind of reevaluate that scope over here. All right. So shall we say just one for now, and maybe at the next meeting, if anybody has a change of heart, we can see if there's more for a committee. I'm not sensing any other people jumping at the bit here. So because who knows, maybe Douglas is really into this. So, okay. Well, Commissioner Bennett, thank you for your volunteering, but I think at this point, we're probably going to table this till the next meeting and see if we can get once everybody's here and once our CIP thing's done, we can kind of finish this item up. So, but for now, I think the general direction is that it would be helpful to reach out to KU and kind of let us know if you hear anything back by September. So
I can do that. Yep.
Cool. Well, I think this is helpful. Any other final questions before we close out this agenda item? Any thoughts? Okay. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Mike, for your time as well. Appreciate you staying around.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. All right. Let's move on to item number 2. Consider appointing a MMT representative to the steering committee for the climate action plan. All right.
So this one's mine again. Kathy Richardson was on here, but she had to take off. So I'm going to kind of summarize what she gave to me, and everything's in here in the memo. But essentially, the work on the climate action plan is continuing. A steering committee is being formed. So back last fall, when Jasmine Moore was both the city and county sustainability director, she came and presented an update on the climate action plan. And she's since left, and there's now we've identified a staff person from the city and county, or kind of separate positions, but still working together. And so Kathy Richardson, who's the city's interim sustainability director, is the lead on this now, and they're looking for appointees to the steering committee. It's not going to be your typical steering committee that's like appointed by the city commission, or 8 to 10 positions or whatever. It's a very large group, is my understanding. And so really it's just a large group that is going to be working with the staff advisory committee to review the climate action plan and review the community engagement that's occurred so far, and see maybe identify what else needs to be done. And obviously we've had conversations about the correlation of transportation and sustainability, some of our conversations. So I think it would be really important if there was someone that was representing this board on that steering committee, and there could even be 2 people if 2 people are interested. So it doesn't have to be just one, but one would be great.
Sounds good. All right. Any questions about what's being presented or asked?
I would add they're planning on meeting monthly. So that's the time commitment. I think they're going to start in August this month, my understanding. And that's about all I know as far as the frequency. I don't know if they've set times or at all other than that. So
How long do they expect it to take? Do you know?
I don't.
It looks like things are finishing up in February, according to the website.
Okay.
Yeah,
At least that was the original.
yeah, that might be.
According to that link in the agenda item, there's a timeline here. So,
Yeah, spring 2023, maybe.
yeah, that's when it goes to
That-
city and county commission.
That's what was on there. Yeah, I don't know if that's up to date or not. So I think, fortunately, Kathy had to log off, but I could follow up with her later. But yeah, I don't know time frame. I think it's been kind of on hold a little as they transitioned into their Jasmine since she left. So I don't know if that's delayed the end date or not, but
Do you know who else is represented on the steering committee? It doesn't look like there's any material for that yet, huh?
yeah, I sure don't.
But it's big.
Yes, I think that's what I heard. 25 to 30 ish.
It's huge.
Yeah. So it's maybe not your traditional steering committee, but more just a larger group that are interested in. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a huge steering committee.
So I don't think there's a set number, I guess is what I heard. So I don't know where they're at now or what they expect, but I think that's what.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any other burning questions, do we have anybody who is interested in joining the steering committee to represent us and to also kind of bring information back our way?
I'd be interested.
All right. Is anybody else interested? Do we have to have a showdown or? I mean, you never know, right? Okay. Well, there's room for a second. So if anybody does decide later that's something that they're interested in, maybe after the first time that you report back, somebody's like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Then who knows, right? But otherwise, I guess any objections, or shall we just head for a motion? All right. Well, in that case, I motion that we nominate Vice Chair Baltuska as the MMTC representative to the steering committee for the climate action plan.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. First by Commissioner Kuzmiak, second by Commissioner Bryan.
Before you do that, do you want to get public comment if there
You're probably right.
if there happen to be any? I don't know, but
That's right. Thank you for reminding me. Is there any public comment on the Zoom call? Okay. In that case, we can just go straight to roll when you're ready, Christina.
Amy Baltuska,
Yes.
Corbett,
Yes.
Wilshire,
Yes.
Aaron Taylor,
Yes.
Pat Fuller,
Yes.
Charlie Brown,
Yes.
Kuzma,
Yes.
Terry Musacki, Sophia Snacki,
Yes.
motion carried 3-0.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Now we're on to staff items.
I don't have anything listed on the agenda. But I would mention we were working on getting the data put together for the 29th and the Haskell crossing you asked about. So I hope to have that next month. And that's all that I have.
I don't know if this is appropriate for staff items or for commission items, but at the last meeting, we had asked about an update on kind of general content of the grant application that's going in for
Safe Streets for All.
Safe Streets for All. And so I wondered if there's an update on that in terms of kind of the range of things that are being considered for that and how that's playing out.
Yeah, we
It's due in September, so.
Yeah, it's due September 15th. So this Baldwin City and Eudora are working on a joint application. But as far as we haven't started working on the details yet, I don't think, to that I could speak to, but, yeah, we plan on submitting it. I guess the one thing, after, the notice of funding opportunity came out on that, KDOT did send out, to, a spreadsheet or database of the communities in Kansas and their crash rates or fatality crash rates per mile, to help, include that in an application. So I did see that. Ours is actually surprisingly, well, not surprising, it's a good thing, but it's a lot lower than other communities, which may not help our application. So that's something that we're certainly going to be including in there. But, yeah, I might be able to, give you a better update in September on that.
Thanks.
Was there a staff item? Sorry, I had a staff item, but I'm trying to figure out what it was. It may just become a commission item if I can't remember in time. We'd asked something a while ago. Oh, do you know where the Old West Lawrence traffic calming pilot is at?
We met with their traffic safety team last week.
Okay.
And we're reviewing their plan and steps forward, but I don't have a timeline or anything other than that at this point. But looking at trying to prioritize, looking at another plan than what is out there. So
okay, so it's
and we've
still moving along
together a survey, send it to them, and so
okay,
moving, but not as moving slowly. But
okay, sounds good. So we move on to commission items. Okay, commission items is next. Who would like to bring something up?
Is this the point at which we want to talk about the letter to the commission?
Yeah, shall we start off with that then?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So just a reminder for those like me who could use a reminder from what happened in the study session. We had discussed in general the project to extend Wakarusa Drive south of K10 and then all the way down to County Road something out of the county, basically across the Wakarusa River. A couple of city commissioners had raised concerns, as well as members of the public have raised concerns about sort of the alignment of that project with the city's overall goals and strategic plans and Plan 2040 and all that jazz. So the issue, however, is that the city has already agreed to pay the match funds, which is about $7 million to KDOT in order to get improvements done to K10, which it seems to be generally agreed upon, something that the city of Lawrence does want. So that wasn't particularly negotiable. That being said, the amount of money that was earmarked for the Wakarusa extension was something like $4 million. Is that right? I forget what the actual number was because it's shared with the county, right? So it's not just city paying it, but it was in the 7 digits. And it is possible to not do the project, but then Lawrence would still be on the hook for sending that set of match funding to KDOT in order to complete the expansion of K10. So I guess if we feel that there are enough concerns with the Wakarusa extension to stop the project or to try to stop the project, then that would mean that the city is still going to pay the money. They're just not going to get a project for it, like a separate project. So what are people thinking here? Because I don't know where everybody stands on this or if we have enough, if we're even unified or not. I have no idea. So can we maybe go around the horn just for fun? Because I know a lot of people don't talk too much. So since this is kind of a weird one and it is a commission item, well, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
So I'm still confused about that $7 million. So it's the city's paying $7 million no matter what. correct? And the question is, does that $7 million go towards extending Wakarusa? Or what's the other? I need clarity on what happens if it doesn't go to extend Wakarusa.
Yeah, well, KDOT asked for about 10% local contribution to the overall improvement of the West Lake project. And through our negotiations or discussions with KDOT, we were basically splitting it about 7 million county, 7 million city. And we had agreed that KDOT would include reconstructing Wakarusa to the north, improving East 900 Road, and then include this project that we had in the CIP to extend Wakarusa to the south. And so that for the city portion of the 7 million was about 4.2 million. So and that's kind of where we had left it at. If we said, if the city said, hey, we do not want to build the road, we would still provide KDOT the $7 million, but not do that portion. But now the county could still do the project. I mean, it's a project in the county CIP. It's a priority for the county. So they could still proceed with it without us. We were planning to have it was a joint project. So that project itself was being split 60% county, 40% city. So it was a roughly 10 or $11 million with our last update. And so the cities was 4.2 million and the counties was 6 point something, I think. I don't know if that helps you. It's a little unique. I mean, it's unique. Just the way that it's evolved, because it was its own project and it was about $7 million. And as we looked at the estimate, we're like, well, it's probably not going to be $14 million. It's probably closer to 10. And it just so there's nothing that I know of that we can trade it for. Say, okay, we want our $4.2 million to go to XYZ. So I think we've committed our money, and if the city doesn't want to participate in that project, it's still not participate, and KDOT would be fine with that, is my understanding, because they're not that road extension is not part of the KDOT plans. The other improvements are included in the KDOT plans. This would be a separate city county project that's tied. It would be built with SLT project for economies. And so, it may be helpful if I just pulled up a map and gave everyone kind of maybe an overview of the area. And I found, let's see here, that shows the road network. Okay, so let me zoom in just a little. It's been updated. Here's Wakarusa, and this is just, this line is just conceptual on this map. But so KDOT's building the interchange here, K10 and Wakarusa. Wakarusa will extend down, and there'll be a roundabout here for eastbound on-off traffic on the K10. And if we proceeded with the project, then it would start here and continue to the south and tie into County Road 458, which ties in over to 59 there at Iowa. So there was, this is, just looking at the history, there was a connection here that was closed in 2017. And then we have the dam road. So you got the which is in the Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction, and it's in the park. So you got the road up top, and you got the park road underneath it. Goes by Eagle Bend Golf Course there. So that's the kind of the area, and I think it shows a history of other roads that were closed. I think with the construction of Clinton Lake, there was access here, and there used to be a bridge over the Wakarusa River and a road here that was closed in 1979. And then KDOT obviously closed this access here. So, some of the need for the project as far as transportation goes was, just the connectivity here to the interchange. And if you couldn't access K10 there, you'd have to go over to Iowa. And so I think the positive things of the project would be reducing congestion on Iowa, having more direct connection. And, we also included extending a bike ped facility with this project as well. When the Castle connection closed, that we heard a lot from folks that were more recreational bikers that would cross there. And so now they either use Iowa or they go over to the dam road. So that's a little bit, I guess, as far as some history and an aerial that kind of shows the proposed project.
So as other history, I think KDOT had led like public engagement discussions or a focus group or something like that for a couple of years, right? To kind of discuss what they were going to do with the K10 expansion. But I think part of the disconnect was that through those discussions, I don't think this road was ever brought up as a part of what would become the total project. Is that correct? Or was it talked about early on?
Yeah, the supplemental environmental impact study they did not include this. I mean, it's a bigger picture study about tolling and whether to toll or not to toll and the different alternatives and the impacts of that. And they're looking at noise from the highway, and that's something they're looking at. So they don't, this Wakarusa extension was not included in that, and it didn't need to be included in that.
Right.
So they did do
that through there. Is it private? Is it public? Is it county? Is it?
It's private. Yep.
So eminent domain?
It would be part of, acquisition would be part of the process, right away acquisition. It's uncommon when we build new roads to do that, but yeah, if it wasn't, there's no platted right of way right now that exists. So yeah, that would need to be acquired. So the portion to the west, like if you Wakarusa, if you just extended it straight on its alignment where it's at today and not wiggled around, everything west of that is Army Corps of Engineer property that we lease and is in the city limits. And so the city limits extend down to, incorporate that park area. But yeah, this is all, to the east is privately owned land. And
it's also in the county as well, I believe. It looks like the current alignment it's actually on the bikeway plan as well. It looks to be almost completely in the county, except for the very bottom turn that cuts across the corner of city land or core land.
Correct. Yeah. This over here is in the county, and this along the line that's on the line. So, right. Yep. How it ties in, where it ties in, exactly. That's undecided. That's something that we would look at with design. I think this was just to minimize the crossing of the river. So that's right. This conceptual alignment was to do that. And yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for bringing us back up to speed. I guess I'll kind of pose a question again now that we've kind of recapped where we are and what some of the history is. So I'm curious to each commissioner, what are your thoughts on the road in general? You've probably heard from some of the public and the city commissioners from, I guess, opposition and not particularly interested in pursuing this, but hopefully now you also are starting to understand the financial implications, the sort of planning and engineering implications about what's going on. So I think if we write a letter, it would have to be from a unified front. So I just want to see where everybody is and if there even is a unified front. So, Will, I'm going to start with you again.
Yep.
I don't know if you got your questions answered.
No, it's fine. I think looking at the map helps. I think that in general, I like the idea of not extending development further, and keeping Lawrence small, like the community small. And I've, reading the public comments and hearing from various folks about the environmental impact and waterways and wetlands and whatnot. I think that given those comments, I think I would fall in favor of not extending the road.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, likewise, not extending, like, because it does run through the county into private property. I'd rather see the money spent on improving the SLT, especially at the youth sports complex in K10, where there's some significant traffic issues, instead of creating a secret bypass road, because that's what feels right now.
Damon?
Yeah, ditto. I'm on board with, providing a recommendation to go without extending Wakarisa. I can appreciate the fact that we tried to get a little bit of a project with the money we were already spending, but I wouldn't really see it as a loss if we go without it. It's more of just going along with the project as we, I guess, didn't know about it. I mean, it's going to be money well spent on the SLT improvements, it sounds like. So I think it'll be a benefit to go without the road, I think, overall.
Okay. On favor. I don't think it aligns with our strategic plan. Both the general strategic plan, that's all words, but also Plan 2040, which is maps. It shows that this area is growth tier 3, which is not meant to be developed until everything's totally built out and we've done growth tier 2 and everything. And though the arguments I've heard from the county engineer at this rate are, well, it's not really meant for development, it's meant for access, but access breeds development. No matter what you do, those folks who own those farms and farmland are going to see dollar cents pretty quickly. And it's very human and natural for them to do so, because all of a sudden they're connected to a city of 100,000 and a highway, which is awesome for them. So it's one of those things where, there's a reason that we keep trying to talk to the planning commission, and that's because planning and transportation are pretty intrinsically linked. So if you add transportation, you will very quickly find that growth will follow. And it just doesn't seem like this is in alignment with our plan. I mean, I'm not opposed to growth really in any way, honestly. I'm generally okay with annexation as long as it's not a financial boondoggle. Grow the population is all good too. But if the whole city kind of voted to not grow here, we should probably listen. Really?
So it seems like the real challenge here is there's an opportunity to get a project completed while we're paying for it. So you're going to have to pay for this eventually if you're going to ever have that road. And can we get it for free, quotation marks around free? It's not right. Growth in that area isn't expected. So the road is, as the county, I guess, is saying, it's strictly for access, not for growth. It's hard to know really what would happen if the road was built for access, if it would increase pressure on growth. So at this point, I think I could go with the sentiment that everyone else has had, that this is not the right time to be extending that road. And yes, we'll have to pay for it eventually when that time comes, but not right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also, would recommend that we draft a letter to the commission recommending that item 1 be removed from the capital improvement plan, which is extending the walkways at the intended use 1200.
I agree with the sentiment that we should not extend walkways at this time, specifically thinking about the vision in Plan 2040. I don't think that taking it into a tier 3 area is going to help us meet that vision.
Yeah, I agree that the environmental impact hasn't really been looked at thoroughly. I think that's really important. And also, if you've ever gone down, taken Iowa down to go to 458 to go to the homes down there, I mean, I think, maybe somebody down there would like to, drive straight up Wakarusa, but really, it's not that far over to Iowa and up. And a lot of money's been spent on extending Iowa. I mean, I think that as far as transit goes, I mean, people needing a road, people who live south of there, do they need a road there? Haven't heard that they do.
The justification I've heard, just in case you're curious from the county engineer, is that it would reduce ambulance response times and fire response times, which I don't doubt is true. I guess what I would be skeptical of is the extent to which it reduces those. Like, is it a 1% reduction or a 50% reduction, right? That would be a huge difference. And I haven't gotten... The other thing is, I mean, it's kind of philosophical, honestly, but if you choose to live in the country, out in the county, that's kind of a social contract that you get less rules and you get less, city taxes, but you also get less city services because you're not in the city. If you want quiet and solitude, don't expect, rapid response at your doorstep. That seems a little bit unreasonable, I think. So I'm not saying that the county engineer is speaking for people there. I just think that's maybe an assumption kind of baked into the justification for the road. And I'm not sure if the assumption is realistic. So, well, let's stop for public comment. I know that we usually don't do it on commission items, like I mentioned earlier, but this is not your average commission item. So, Michael, if you're ready, you got 3 minutes.
Yeah, Michael Allman, Sustainability Action Network, and I'm encouraged by everybody's understanding and position on this. As far as moving the road to the west, which would then put it in the city limits, the county engineer has very clearly told me that the Corps of Engineers will not let them build a road on Corps land. Plus, you're going to take it right through Eagle Bend Golf Course. So I don't think that's reasonable. And Commissioner Bryan really nailed it. I think the sticky wicket is, do we have some construction project that we can contribute to the $7 million, or do we have to pony up cash? And if I could share my screen, I have a suggestion. This is the Clinton Parkway interchange design from KDOT that Commissioner Baltuska flagged months ago as a major problem. The lower half here, this is the 27th and Wakarusa intersection. One of the stated purposes of doing the SLT is to increase the safety, particularly 7 ways a bicycle can be struck at this intersection. Well, they're going to do that correctly and make it safer. At the same time, they're making this one horribly unsafe. 6 ways that a bicycle can be struck at the Clinton Parkway roundabout. It's hard to see, but this is the loop. The loop would come right to here and cross over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 highway lanes at grade. No overpass, no underpass, at grade. Some of the traffic on these outer ramps would be going, 40, 50 miles an hour. So I would suggest 2 things. You talked earlier about the Iowa Loop overpass as a potential cost share. And then this needs to be redesigned no matter what. No matter what, this needs to be redesigned. It's insane. So those are my 2 suggestions. I think that could come to $4 million. So thank you so much for your interest.
Sure. Thank you, Michael.
I just want to point out that the image that Michael showed, I don't think is the current proposal from KDOT.
Clinton or Walker Russo? Was he
showing?
He was showing Clinton.
Okay.
Yeah. Which at one point was, I think, a lot more roundabouts, if I recall. I think it's been toned down a little bit, but well, Dave, I guess that's a question for you. You've been through these negotiations with KDOT and you understand what they're kind of looking for in a project that would be qualifying as a match, right? And at this point, there are no shovel-ready projects that would qualify as a match, right? So, I mean, given the timing, would there be enough timing to come up with a new concept for a project, go through design, have it shovel-ready for whenever this is being constructed, which is pretty soon, right? Like next year or two?
Yeah, they haven't announced a start construction date yet. Hoping that it gets moved into the funding plan here this summer, but I don't think there's any opportunity to make any changes with their project at this point. Can always continue to ask them, and they can tell us no. I think they're going to be providing an update to the city commission here in the next month or two, try to get them here to provide an update on the overall project. And hopefully there's good news that they're moving forward with funding it. So that might be able to hear it directly from them, but really they're past field check and moving forward on plans. So as far as other things, there was no other thing that we identified to include for our match. So started out with just $7 million for the highway project. And so we've tried to include things that would benefit, directly benefit city and county in that. And that's what they had agreed to. So,
and I guess it would probably help if this project's benefited KDOT, right? So I don't know if this is what Michael had in mind, but the car traffic entering the interchange at Clinton and K10 looks pretty gnarly, and there would probably be a lot of potential conflicts with bikes, which is, it's obviously really bad for cyclists, but also not great for cars either, because you got to slow down. You don't want to hit somebody, right? I mean, is this an opportunity to have a bridge just over all that stuff, which is kind of crazy, but probably $4 million crazy too. I mean, they're not cheap, right? So if that's the kind of project that we could do and not just throw our money into the KDOT void, but actually get something out of it, I would assume that would help KDOT, because then entrance and exit off the highway would be easier. So I don't know. That's just completely out of left field, but I mean,
if we could get more improvements, I would take them. So,
do you think it's worth looking into? I mean, does it pass the insanity check, or is it just too long of a bridge? Like, I have no idea.
I don't know if they've looked at it. I don't know if
I'd be interested.
Bridge or tunnel. I think the Iowa may be crossing maybe a tunnel and not a bridge. Something that be looked at, but there's a lot going on there with the roundabouts and to get ADA compliant overpass or underpass challenges with that, I would think. And so, yeah.
Do you think you'd be able to bring up the most recent plan set, or is it kind of hidden in an agenda a couple months ago?
Yeah, I don't have it.
No, it's okay.
I don't have it handy. Maybe we can dig into that a little more at the next meeting.
Yeah. Sounds like we have some time, right? So, but I don't know if that necessarily, I mean, is that something that we would include in this letter? Like, consider a different project that would still, help. So we're not missing out on $4 million of, I don't even know if to call it free. It's not free. We're still paying money for it, but we're also getting something in return. It's like a tote bag from NPR. It's not just a donation. It's also, you get a thing out of it, which is nice.
It could be possibly, vague. I mean, without detailing it, but just saying, recommend not doing the Wakarusa extension, and also to explore other projects that would improve bike ped access or, something along those lines.
Does that sound
Either
reasonable to everybody?
because we're talking about either Iowa Street or at Clinton Parkway. So if we, could word it so that, explore those other options as a replacement for that project.
Okay. Okay. So since we would likely need to get this in, I guess, by the next city commission meeting, probably before our next MMTC meeting, right? I think that's what the schedule was. So in that case, we would probably need to make a motion that, does the commission trust me to pen a letter and just do my best? I don't have to write it, by the way. Somebody else can too, if anybody is into that, but I feel like I probably should take first responsibility. So unless anybody's particularly passionate about this, I can give it a go.
Yeah, I think you're a good candidate. I'd like to make a motion that we authorize Nick to draft a letter to the city commission recommending that the Wakarusa extension project be removed from the CIP and to investigate with KDOT alternative projects that would include bike ped safety along the new SLT.
I'll second that.
Before we say yes or no, does that encapsulate everything that we wanted to talk about? Do you want me to quickly run down the things I captured from what everybody is kind of bringing up as what their concerns are, just to make sure I got it all? I feel like I saw concerns over excess city growth in the wrong direction, misalignment with Plan 2040, would prefer to do improvements to K10 adjacent roads. What was the other one? Sorry. Yeah, not aligned with Plan 2040, and more scrutiny of the environmental impact of this particular project, which wasn't given really a lot of thought originally. So I will try to move those in and just kind of put those as quick bullet points. Okay. Any other discussion, or should we put it to vote?
Okay, one comment. I'm not like arguing with you, but the road extension is in Plan 2040. So it's been in transportation plan for a long time. It's a future road. So the timing, I think we had conversations about the timing. And so you might, if you want to specify like misalignment, yeah,
it's a good idea, I think.
I mean,
I think the issue here is, the CIP has a 5-year time horizon and the transportation plan has a 20-year time horizon. It's just
soon to be almost 30. I guess it's going to be like 25 years soon. So
yeah, but this isn't the right time for that project to get put into the CIP.
Yeah. It is interesting that T2050 has something that conflicts with Plan 2040, of which it is a part of. It's like, who do you believe, right? There's like, if we don't want to expand to that area by housing and commercial stuff, but if we do want to expand to by road, it's almost like they forgot that there's a link between land use and, transportation. But Dave's right. I mean, if it's in T2050, it's in Plan 2040. So
I think the other confusing part is in the MPO's plan, I believe it's an arterial road. And if it's for access, I don't know that it needs to be an arterial road.
Yeah.
And that might just be, every 5 years that plan gets updated. Maybe it needs to be given a little more attention.
Okay.
Maybe it needs to be just a bike gravel path only.
The sweet ramp over the river. Or a ford. Actually, no, I used to bike on Beach Drive in Washington, D.C. There was a literal ford through the river that you could still go through. It was awesome, especially for kids. All right. Any other discussion? Dave, do you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay. All good points all around. Thank you all. So let's, Christine, if you can call roll, please.
Yes.
We'll get this.
Paul Tuska,
Yes.
Laura Bennett,
Yes.
Will Sharp,
Yes.
Aaron Payton,
Yes.
Pat Collette,
Yes.
Charlie Brown,
Yes.
Nick Disney,
Yes.
Nicholas Redding is absent, Althea Schnappi,
Yes.
motion carried 3-0.
I gotta be honest with you guys, work is crazy right now. This may not get to this weekend. So somebody may need to remind me, like, have you written that yet? So, it's gonna be a rough week. All right. That brings us up to, wait, does anybody have any more commission items? Because we skipped to the big one. It looks like you might.
I do. I just wanted to remind everyone our bylaws do require that if you're absent, you need to notify the chair at least 24 hours in advance. And if you don't do that 4 times, then it's considered involuntary resignation. If you are absent 6 times in a calendar year, that's also considered involuntary resignation, regardless of whether you notified the chair. That said, I'd like to know if Commissioner Redding, if his absences have hit the mark where he's considered involuntarily resigned. I don't know if we have the attendance records, but
Yeah.
it just started in February.
Yeah, I don't know.
Seems like he's real close to being.
What number is that? But yeah, I did, and I did not know he was not going to be here this evening. So I'll follow up with it.
I like that to be, I mean, I'm not trying to come down on him, but if he can't make it, if it, for whatever reason, then we need to open up that position for someone else. So maybe we can get that clear by the next meeting, if he's with us or not. I appreciate it.
I just have one quick thing is that Damon and I sat in on the stakeholder input interview for Transportation 2050 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so basically the questions he asked were the things that we talked about at our last meeting. We brought up, emphasis on safety and equity, incorporate action steps identified in the new PED plan, invest at a higher level for bike PED projects to meet community expectations, multimodal transportation more closely integrated with land use codes, more closely integrated with subdivision codes, greater emphasis on intersection design to promote safety, and examine resource allocation among the modes. So those were the kind of the high points of what we presented to him.
Okay. Was it a 2-way interview or just kind of you guys telling them what?
Yeah, and he basically was asking questions and then follow-up questions. So we did it via Zoom. So
what's the next step with T2050? I guess this is kind of the information gathering phase.
Yeah, they've been doing, they closed the survey and then they're doing these stakeholder interviews, and I'm not sure where they're at with those. I got the sense that they were getting close to being completed with that, but then so information gathering to get ready to start a draft plan. So
okay, sounds good. Thank you all for staying up to date with that. Any other commission items from up here? All right, let's move on to the calendar then. So it looks like next month is going to be the pedestrian project plan review.
So Wednesday, September 7th, so we're having it on a Wednesday with the Labor Day weekend there. Crossing policy, the consultant that we are working with was planning to bring that first draft of that. And so we've pinned that in for the study session to get feedback on that. And the pedestrian plan review on the regular meeting, and 6th Street shared use path plans as well. So, so we have for September at this time. I was thinking about the unmistakable identity brainstorm for October study session, plugging that in for October, but don't have anything on there officially yet.
Okay. Do we think the crossing policy could make sense as an agenda item? Is there going to be any feedback that's, I guess, requested from us? Or is it just like, here it is? I'm assuming they're
then you can provide feedback in the study session.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay. This is just a draft, right? That presented.
Won't be any recommendations. It'll just be
Great.
unless anybody else has any burning topics they wanted to cover for a study session. I think by October, we may have a better idea of what we want to talk about with CIP stuff. So there may be something there, like you were saying, like we can start informing our next moves. So yeah, we'll keep it open for now. And if we can't think of anything, let's do that. The unmistakable identity brainstorming session.
The wayfinding signs.
Yeah.
If that gets approved, I'd love to know more about what staff's already got in mind.
It'd be cool to bring in Explore Lawrence, because I think they would like to be involved with that, because it'll definitely help tourism infrastructure. And the chamber.
And it goes well with unmistakable identity.
That's kind of their thing. Okay. With engaging those other entities, do you need assistance reaching out to, I already forget her name, whoever runs Explore Lawrence, and maybe somebody from the chamber?
Not at this time.
Okay.
No.
Cool. I guess just let us know. All right. Well, it sounds good for calendar. Unless anybody has any other suggested additions, I think we're probably good for the next at least month. All right. And the work plan. Should probably go over that.
Yeah,
I think it's just more for reference,
just
right?
attached it.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else on calendar or that they want to do before we adjourn? All right. Well, in that case, let's move on to item H, adjournment. All in favor of adjourning? Can we do a show of hands? All right. That's unanimous, Christine, just in case. We're facing in odd directions, so. Thank you, everybody, for a good meeting, and we'll see you next month on a Wednesday. Hopefully I can remember that.